On February the 20th, 2015, Avon and Somerset Police in the UK received a phone call from the family of Becky Watts, who was just 16, saying that she'd gone missing. Within hours, an intense search was started, and desperate appeals were made by her family for information. However, by this point, she was already dead, having been murdered by her stepbrother, Nathan Matthews, a paedophile who had a fixation on petite teenage girls. As if killing her was not bad enough, she'd been dismembered, and the police captured him buying the circular saw he used for this sickening task. But he was not alone in his crimes. He was helped by his girlfriend, Shauna Hoare. This evil couple thought they were very clever and had gotten away with murder, but their lies were quickly uncovered, and their sickening crime and their pathetic attempts to manipulate the police were laid bare. Welcome to Evil Among Us. Rebecca Marie Watts, known as Becky, was born on the 3rd of June 1998 in Bristol, a city in southwest England. It doesn't seem like she had the easiest start in life, with her parents splitting up before she was born, and she spent the first few years of her life living with her mother, Tanya Watts. Becky was taken into care aged 3 due to concerns about neglect, before living with her father, Darren Galsworthy, and his partner, a woman called Angie Matthews, who had a son from a previous relationship, Nathan Matthews. Becky had delayed speech and didn't talk properly until she was around 3.5 years old, and tragically, her first proper word was apparently Nathan. Angie said that, although Becky was her stepdaughter, they were inseparable, and she loved her, and raised her as though she was her own biological daughter. Becky also had a close relationship with her biological mother, Tanya, despite not living with her, and they would see each other regularly. However, a lack of support during her vital early years meant that Becky struggled with various issues throughout her short life, including anxiety and self-confidence. Becky went to Sutton Hill Junior School, where her teachers remembered her as a quiet but happy pupil, with one teacher saying, quote, "She was incredibly shy and incredibly quiet, but by the end of year 5, she started to come out of herself." However, it was when Becky moved to secondary school at the age of 11 that she began to have difficulties. She was bullied, and comments were specifically made about her weight. This shattered Becky's already fragile self-esteem. When she was 13 years old, Angie called the local Children and Young People services and asked for help, as Becky was refusing to go to school. Various professionals engaged with Becky. She was showing a high level of defiance and aggression when challenged. It was clear this was a defense mechanism, as she developed a significant fear of people and places, and tragically, she was particularly terrified about being abducted, as she'd scared herself reading various stories on the internet. Becky also developed anorexia, and her issues meant that she was referred to a child psychologist and an eating disorder clinic to try and help her. In addition, Becky began engaging with the Hospital Education Service, a specialist service providing education for children who have mental or physical health issues, which mean they're unable to attend mainstream school. The combination of a new school environment and therapy meant that Becky started to get better. She was coping better when attending her classes, began to develop friendships, and began doing things that teenage girls did, like going out shopping with her friends and going to sleepovers. However, when she was 14 years old, concerns were raised again when Becky told teachers that she was being pressured into sending indecent images of herself to other boys, and they also wanted her to send explicit text messages. Becky was referred to services to provide support to children at risk of sexual exploitation. Unfortunately, whilst the focus of professionals was on protecting Becky from predatory males in the world, the most dangerous person in her life was someone she knew well, someone she called her stepbrother, Nathan Matthews, a disturbed and predatory paedophile who, rather than protecting her, would end her life. I usually refer to the offenders in my videos by their last name, but as one of their last names is Hoare, using this might distract from what I'm saying, so I'll just use their first names on this occasion. So, Nathan Charles Matthews was born on the 9th of January 1987 in Bristol to his mother Angie. He never knew his father. At around the age of 7 years old, Nathan went to live with his grandparents. Why he moved there is unclear, but it seems he had regular contact with his mother, and then eventually Becky Watts' father, Darren Galsworthy, when the pair began their relationship. His early years seem unremarkable. There may have been early warning signs suggesting the monster he'd become, but none of these are documented. As a teenager, Nathan joined an Army Cadet attachment at Cadbury Heath in Bristol. He seemed to enjoy this and was seen as a model cadet. During this time, he was given weapons training, but also, importantly for later, was taught how to deal with spillages, including using a product similar to cat litter to absorb liquid, but also cover up odour. Nathan went on to study electrical engineering at the City of Bristol College, before, at the age of 18 years old, joining the Royal Logistics Corps Army Reserves, training at the Maindee Barracks, Cardiff, so basically he was a part-time soldier. It was at this point where warning signs appear to have been noted. Nathan was described as a good soldier, but was also known to be, quote, stroppy, with a fellow squaddy stating, quote, he had a bit of an anger problem at times. He would sometimes snap in frustration and throw things in temper sometimes. It's also important to point out at this point that since he was a child, Nathan suffered from a rheumatic condition known as fibromyalgia, a chronic illness that causes pain and tenderness throughout the body. The severity of this condition varies from person to person, but in Nathan's case, it was sometimes severe and he would often be debilitated by pain. So it seems likely that Nathan was a man plagued by feelings of inadequacy and shame due to his height, with him being only 5'5", and his physical health issues. It seems that Nathan was a petulant, immature man who expected others to do what he said. He wanted to be in control of situations and people, as a way to feel powerful to offset the deep, dark hole of insecurity inside of him. As he got older, Nathan's behaviour in the family home also began to deteriorate. Initially, he and Becky appeared close, but he began to resent her. He was jealous of how close she was with Angie, and he looked for any opportunity to destroy her self-esteem. This included calling her fat, knowing full well that she was battling anorexia. The pair would have frequent arguments, and this included Nathan chasing Becky upstairs, shouting that he would kill her. Becky once told a psychologist that she was afraid of Nathan. However, it was what Nathan was doing in his private life which gives a window into his twisted mind. So from around his mid-teens, Nathan had developed an obsession with pornography and would spend hours at a time watching porn on his computer. He had a particular obsession with videos and pictures showing violent sex with females, and especially while they were restrained in some way. Evidence later showed they'd been watching videos where the scenario was men breaking into homes, tying up and raping the female occupants. He was also particularly fixated on legal pornography which fits under the umbrella of, quote, teen, where you have an adult actress clearly made to look younger than she is, so that some viewers can fantasize that she's a child while not getting into trouble for possessing this material. Despite his overt conflict with Becky, it's clear that he was also sexually attracted to her from a young age. It was later disclosed that he'd rubbed Becky's inner thigh in a sexual way when she was 8 years old, and he was around 20, and he'd apparently done this to two of her friends who were the same age. It's apparent that Nathan had fantasies about controlling women and little girls, sexually violating them in order to take what he wanted and dominate them, and this extended to how he would act towards his partners. In around 2006, Nathan, then aged around 19 years old, began a relationship with a woman known only as KJ. She later reported to the police that Nathan was controlling and abusive in the relationship, demanding sex whenever he wanted, as well as controlling who she saw and what she did. He would always either need to be with her or in constant contact with her, questioning her on what she was up to. KJ managed to escape the relationship. I do not know how old KJ was, but it seems that she may have been an adult, or at least over the age of consent in the UK, which is 16. However, after KJ left him, it appears that Nathan began looking for teenage girls to start relationships with, and he was looking for those who were particularly vulnerable. No doubt he was doing this because he was sexually attracted to teenage girls, but he also thought it would be easier to control a child. In 2008, he met 14-year-old Shauna Hoare. Shauna Stacey Charmaine Hoare was born on the 12th of February 1994 in Bristol. Her childhood was extremely dysfunctional. Her father left the family home when she was very young, and her mother, Lisa Donovan, remarried soon afterwards. Before the age of 5, Shauna was taken into care due to concerns about neglect, emotional and physical abuse within the home. She was one of 8 children her mother had with 3 different men. Shauna moved from foster home to foster home, never settling in one place for very long. Eventually, Shauna returned to live with Lisa at home in Bristol when she was 13 years old. I don't have the information about what Shauna saw or experienced in foster care, but I imagine that this and her early years at home led to her becoming an extremely damaged child. By the age of 13 years old, she was smoking, drinking, and it appears sexually active, being preyed upon by older men. During this same year, the police received a report that she'd been raped on her way to school, but she refused to give a statement, so no one was arrested. Just a year later, when Shauna was 14, she met Nathan Matthews. How or where is unclear. Shauna's mother, Lisa, later recalled meeting Nathan, stating that he was, quote, controlling and flirty with everyone, sexually orientated, very overpowering. And this apparently included rubbing up against one of her other daughters, who was also a teenager. Unfortunately, this gives an insight into the environment and people which shaped Shauna. She was underage and brought a man round to the house who was around 21 years old at the time, and her mother apparently didn't bat an eyelid. Nathan told his mother and stepfather that Shauna was 16 years old, and despite any reservations they may have had, they tried to make Shauna feel welcome. She became part of the family, to the point where she was registered as Angie's carer due to her having multiple sclerosis. And when she and Darren got married in 2013, she was a bridesmaid, and this picture is truly horrifying, knowing that one of the people in this photograph would be dead less than 2 years after it was taken, and two others would utterly destroy the trust placed in them by Darren and Angie and tear the family apart. In order to fully understand the murder of Becky Watts and what happened afterwards, I need to explain the relationship between Nathan Matthews and Shauna Hoare, which began in 2008 and continued for around the next 7 years until their arrest. It was a complicated relationship, which, in my opinion, was characterised by a shifting dynamic that began with obvious one-sided abuse, but then devolved into something even more horrific. I want to be clear that by highlighting trauma in the backgrounds of the offenders in my videos, I'm not condoning their actions. I merely provide this information to help understand the people they were. Trust me, whilst I might empathise with the trauma in their lives, I've absolutely no sympathy for the crimes they commit. With that being said, it's clear that Nathan was abusive and controlling towards Shauna. She was not allowed to buy cigarettes and other items for herself, and had to ask him. When he would buy her things, he would expect her gratitude to be paid with sexual favours. Nathan would also demean Shauna, saying she was, quote, too fat and needed to lose weight. He directed what she could eat and when. He would also abuse her in front of other people, including one time when Nathan told her to, quote, shut the fuck up, you twat, when she tried to speak up about something. During the trial, one of Shauna's friends described Nathan severing the link between them and him making it very difficult for her to see her friends. If she did end up going out to see people, he would demand to always be there, and if it involved a drive, Nathan would demand that the person they were going to visit send him money to pay for petrol. Shauna later described the relationship as follows, quote, I basically spent almost 6 years joined to him. One way or another, it was like I was going to be stuck like this forever, never able to go out, do anything. When she was 16, Nathan gave Shauna permission to go to college, where she wanted to study childcare, but he quickly changed his mind and forbid her from going due to his jealousy about her even speaking to other men. He and Shauna began living together from around 2010. Neither worked consistently and so relied on benefits, and their home, as shown later, was in a state of squalor. Behind closed doors, Nathan was also violent and frequently beat Shauna, with the most serious incident, which has echoes of his lace behaviour, involving him grabbing Shauna by the hair and then strangling her for several seconds. If Shauna tried to leave the relationship, Nathan would pull out every trick in the book to regain control over her, including trying to gain sympathy by self-harming. On one occasion, when she ended the relationship, Nathan stabbed himself with a fork and violently scratched his own face. As Shauna grew up, Nathan appears to have lost sexual interest in her and looked for other ways to get his kicks. One way was to ask Shauna to organise a threesome with one of her young-looking friends, which happened several times, with him filming this. However, he'd also tell Shauna about his fancies about abducting and raping teenage girls. Text messages recovered after both of their arrests show the sickening fancies that both appeared to have, with Shauna apparently encouraging Nathan and even trying to procure him potential victims. In November 2014, just months before Becky's murder, Nathan was working as a takeaway delivery driver when he delivered a takeaway to a 16-year-old girl's house. Obviously, due to having an order, he knew her name and began searching for her on Facebook. Messages show that Nathan gave Shauna her name and asked her to message the girl, which she did, apparently to try and convince her to come round so that Nathan could have sex with her. Whether she responded is not entirely clear, but on the 2nd of January 2015, Nathan sent the following message to Shauna saying, quote, "She came into the shop, but didn't speak to me. I didn't say anything to her either, as I was talking to a man. Laugh out loud, awkward." Police recovered a series of much more disturbing messages from the 9th of December 2014, which began with Nathan saying to Shauna, quote, "Fuck you, bring me back 2 pretty schoolgirls then." Shauna replied, "Laugh out loud, yeah, I'll just kidnap them from school." Later that day, Shauna sent Nathan a message saying, quote, "Just went to Cost Cutter and saw a very pretty petite girl. Almost knocked her out to bring home, laugh out loud." Less than a minute later, Nathan wrote, "Don't you almost me, now fucking do it, bitch." Shauna said, "Laugh my fucking ass off, yeah? I'll just go back in time to when I saw her, time travel with her to our attic, laugh out loud." Police were able to track down both children and establish they'd not been harmed, but it became clear the resemblance that both girls had to Becky, and, generally, from the contents of his computer, it was apparent that Nathan was fixated with children who looked just like his stepsister. Living in squalid conditions, barely working, whilst watching pornography together, and discussing Nathan's sexual fantasies, the topic of Becky inevitably came up repeatedly. Shauna would later state in court that Nathan said he, quote, "hated Becky." I think there are 2 reasons for this, compared to the bullshit he came up with in court. Firstly, her lifestyle. He was a man who demanded nothing, living in a shit tip. But Becky, the intruder in the family, was a beautiful 16-year-old girl with her life ahead of her, who was starting to overcome her difficulties and live her life. But I think he also hated that he could not have her. She was his sexual obsession, and not being able to have her was driving him crazy. So by early 2015, he devised a plan to take what he wanted by kidnapping and raping her and depriving Becky of the life he felt that he deserved by killing her. Shauna was inevitably a victim in this relationship when she was a child, the girl in the hands of a predatory, manipulative paedophile who ground her down, who spent significant efforts moulding her into the woman that she became. I think the repeated exposure to the sick, depraved man that Nathan Matthews is led to Shauna, who was already a very troubled person, developing horrific, distorted attitudes and beliefs, which meant that she shared his delusions that abducting, raping, and killing children was acceptable, and, like him, probably found these fantasies sexually arousing. This is known as a folie à deux, and is something seen in other killer couples. However, regardless of whatever control and influence Nathan had over Shauna, I firmly believe that he simply built on something that was fundamentally missing within her all along, including a lack of conscience and a lack of empathy for others. I think this is shown by her cold and cat-fainted behaviour after the murder. I think looking a bit deeper into her background, you begin to see her own twisted behaviour before she'd even met Nathan. Specifically, people who knew Shauna when she was a child state that she was a compulsive liar. She would pretend to be pregnant and have cancer in order to gain attention. She was fully willing to manipulate others in her own right. I think one point which would likely guarantee any sympathy for Shauna is lost, and further epitomise the selfishness and horrific nature of the pair, is the fact that these two had a child together, a daughter. They themselves were parents. This is detail that doesn't appear in almost any newspaper article, but is confirmed by a serious case review that I've read, and Shauna herself in one of her police interviews. This child was born towards the end of 2012. I've got no other information, but even this speaks volumes. Despite being a mother herself, the parent of a female child, she was willing to help her partner rape and murder the child of another mother. The same logic applies to Nathan, and it's clear they both didn't give a shit about this child, risking their daughter growing up without a mother or a father just so Nathan could get his kicks. So regardless of whether Shauna was a victim once upon a time, by the point of the murder she was a willing accomplice, a mother who decided that her and her partner's fantasies of raping and killing someone else's child were justified. The date chosen to abduct, rape and kill Becky Watts was the 19th of February 2015, It's clear this date was chosen for a reason. Becky's father, Darren, would not be home, and Angie had a hospital appointment. Becky would be alone in the house. By this point, Nathan put together what was described in court as a, quote, kidnap kit. This included a large bag, stun guns, handcuffs, face masks, and duct tape. With everything in place, this evil pair put their plan into action. What happened to Becky Watts and the timeline can be established from various sources, including eyewitness testimony, police investigation, and even the statements of Nathan Matthews when he wasn't lying, which was rarely. What we do know is on the 19th of February 2015, Becky's father, Darren Galsworthy, was at work, and her stepmother, Angie Matthews, was picked up to go to a hospital appointment at around 10:30 a.m, leaving Becky in the house alone, with her being sat in her bedroom, texting her friends and her boyfriend. At 10:50 a.m, Nathan and Shauna left their home at 14 Cotton Mill Lane and drove towards 18 Crown Hill, Bristol, Becky's home address. This journey would only have taken 10 minutes, but they stopped at a local Tesco's to buy batteries for the stun guns. In the vehicle, strapped into her car seat, was the pair's daughter, who would have been around 2 years old at this point. Becky sent her final text message at 11:07, and it's assumed that Nathan and Shauna arrived soon afterwards. It's known that entry was gained to the house with a key that was left hidden outside for emergencies. And, by his later confession, Nathan put a mask on and went upstairs to Becky's bedroom. Whether Shauna also went up to the bedroom at this point is unclear. Nathan went into Becky's room and attacked her. Becky fought for her life ferociously, and her post-mortem showed that she had 40 bruises on her body from her attempts to fend off Nathan. He wrapped tape around her head and eventually placed his hand over Becky's mouth and nose, restricting her breathing until she suffocated to death. I imagine that, nastiest than he is, Nathan imagined walking into Becky's room, using his army trainings to subdue her, and then forcing her into the large bag he brought with him and taking her away to a separate location, no doubt to rape and eventually kill her. But he was as weak as piss, and no doubt overestimates his prowess and had to fight Becky every inch of the way. Now dead, Nathan put Becky's body in the bag, then was taken out of the house. In court, it was argued that, due to Nathan's physical health issues, he would have likely been unable to carry Becky's body without some sort of assistance. Therefore, it's apparent based on this that Shauna helped move Becky's body out of the house and likely helped him put her in the bag in the first place. The bag containing Becky's body was placed in the car boot, and at 12:45 p.m, when Angie returned from the hospital, she found Nathan, Shauna, and her granddaughter in the property watching TV. A few hours later, Darren came home from work. Neither Angie or Darren had any idea that in order to get into the house, they'd walked within feet of Becky's body hidden in the car. Eventually, at around 7 p.m, Nathan and Shauna made their excuses and drove back home, taking Becky's body with them. When they got back to their own property, Becky's body was placed in the bath, and Nathan then stabbed her 19 times with a knife and also stabbed her in the neck with a screwdriver. No doubt this was him taking out his anger on her, that his plan had not worked and she had fought back. How dare she not give him what he wanted? Becky's body remained in the bath overnight, and just after midday on the 20th of February 2015, Nathan was caught on CCTV buying a power saw, the tool he would use to dismember Becky. He then set about this gruesome task. In court, Nathan would claim when he did this, he, quote, closed my eyes, had the saw in one hand, with him implying that he was so disgusted with his actions that he could not bear to look and basically dismembered Becky blind. However, the prosecution noted that there was no damage to the bathtub itself. Nathan was fully in control and methodically cut up the body of his 16-year-old stepsister. That same day, Shauna made searches online, including going on YouTube and typing, quote, "Do you want to hide a body?" Sickeningly, what she was looking for was a spoof video of the song "Do You Want to Build a Snowman" from the film Frozen, which depicts two girls acting out a scene where they place a body inside a rucksack and sing lyrics such as, quote, "Will you help me hide a body? It doesn't have to be in one piece." So these two pieces of shit, whilst the dead body of a 16-year-old child was lying in their flat, were listening to a comedy parody song. This detail shows the absolute lack of remorse of this pair They were no doubt exhilarated by what they had done, and like typical psychopaths, they obviously thought they were very clever and could easily get away with this. Becky's body was cut into 8 pieces, and her head, left arm, right hand, left hand, right leg and torso were all wrapped separately, being bound tightly in cling film, duct tape and parcel tape. Some of the parts were covered in table salt or cat litter in order to absorb any fluids and reduce the smell of decomposition. Becky's body was then placed inside 3 suitcases. On both February the 21st and February the 22nd, 2015, Nathan and Shauna were seen going to various shops, buying cleaning products to try and cover up the crime scene. Whilst Becky Watts was murdered on the 19th of February 2015, it wasn't until the 20th of February that she was reported missing to the police. This was apparently because her family assumed that she'd gone out on the 19th and then had simply decided to stay over at a friend's house. However, on the 20th of February 2015, Becky's boyfriend and her friends went to her house and said they were concerned. So it wasn't until 4 p.m. on the 20th of February 2015 that the police were called. They began the investigation immediately, and it soon became clear the circumstances of Becky's disappearance were suspicious, as she hadn't got any money with her, no change of clothes, and she hadn't told anyone where she was going. The police began searching the local area, including going house to house and searching open areas, including a local nature reserve. They took to social media, looking for information using the hashtag #FindBecky. On the 23rd of February 2015, Becky's father and stepmother, Darren and Angie, made an appeal for information about her disappearance, as shown by this clip.
Your typical teenage girl, lots of selfies, music, fashion.
Becky's father and stepmother told me today that her disappearance is completely out of character, and they are desperate for news.
Bex, if you can see this, get in contact. And if anyone out there knows something, just tell us. Just bring her home safe. If you've got her, then put her somewhere we can find her. We want her home, please.
She's not in trouble. She's just wanted here. We just want her back. That's all we want.
This clip is haunting, not only because, by this point, Becky was already dead and had been dismembered, but also because her son killed his daughter. Police quickly became interested in Nathan and Shauna, as they had been in the house around the time that Becky went missing. Initially, they were considered witnesses, and the police first contacted them on the 23rd of February 2015 to come in for interview. Alarm bells started ringing when both seemed not particularly bothered about prioritising trying to find Becky, with them stating they were too busy to come in. What the police later found out was that Nathan and Shauna were playing for time, as they knew the police were circling and they needed to get rid of Becky's dismembered body, which was still in their flat. So, on the evening of the 23rd of February 2015, Nathan called a friend of his, 29-year-old Carl Demetrius, and said that he would pay him to move and store the suitcases and other items at his home address. The sum promised was around £10,000. Carl then contacted a friend of his, 23-year-old James Ireland, who was promised around half the money to help Carl load the items in a van at Nathan's property and then unload them at the other end. Both of them travelled to Nathan's address, loaded up Becky's body parts in the van, and then drove back to 9 Barton Court, a property just 80 metres away. This was the property of Carl and his 23-year-old partner J. Dean Parsons, and the suitcases containing Becky's body parts were then hidden in their garden shed. In addition, items used in the initial crime, the dismemberment, and the clean-up were also hidden here. All three would later claim they had no idea what was in the suitcases and was simply focused on the money they had been promised, and, when pushed, said they thought it might have been drugs in the suitcases. With Becky's remains now out of the way, suddenly Nathan and Shauna made themselves available to the police, and they were interviewed twice, on the 26th of February and the 27th of February 2015. Both were cocky, confident, and especially related to Nathan, seemed amused by the whole situation, with him smirking during questioning and complaining about his back hurting and how being questioned was hurting his little brain. I'm going to show 2 clips, The first is part of the first interview with Sean on the 26th of February 2015, which I've had to cut up because the sound goes completely haywire towards the end. The second clip shows part of her second interview the next day.
I think we got there about 11ish. The door was locked, so obviously we used the key from underneath the recycling bin. Got in. Heard music upstairs. Assumed Becky had been in then. I went into the kitchen to get a cigarette and went to go outside to have a cigarette. My daughter started whinging because she wanted to come up with me, so I took her down to the garden to help feed the rabbit while I had a cigarette. Probably was about 15-20 minutes. Then we came back up. I went into the kitchen to get a drink, I think it was, and wash my hands. Then I heard the front door slam. Carried on washing my hands, went into the living room. And then I think it wasn't until a lot later on that Angie asked me if Becky had gone out. And I said, yeah, I heard the door go. She must have gone out earlier. Washing my hands, I think, I heard the door slam, front door. Again, I didn't look at the time or think anything of it, so I didn't really kind of like, oh, what was that? It was just the door, so Becky would have gone out.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I think I've accidentally got this in the wrong order here.
Okay.
You have to clarify this. So, right, let me just go back slightly then, if I could. The door slamming then. You've already said you got to go from the kitchen through to the living room.
Yep.
So, how far away from that front door would you have been?
But you've got the front door, the living room, and about halfway up the hallway is the kitchen. So I would have been at the sink. So a distance, a reasonable amount, I'd say.
Okay. And immediately before this sound of the door slamming, what could you hear then?
I think it was just CBeebies again, to be honest. I was kind of more, trying to make sure I had vitamins back and getting my drink.
Yeah.
No, I heard stomping down the stairs. That's what made me think that Becky left in a mood. So I said to Angie, because obviously the door slammed, but I wasn't sure if that was the wind. I took it because there was like quite stomp, stomp, stomp down the stairs. I assumed, she was in a bit of one of her tantrums.
Yeah. And then the only other thing was just a minor thing really, but I think some of our colleagues were trying to speak to Nathan, just part of those initial inquiries just a few days ago on Tuesday, I think it was, and they sort of perceived a bit of reluctance. Do you have any knowledge of that?
Not to my knowledge, but I wouldn't know, no.
No. Okay. Has Nathan had any sort of concerns about speaking to us?
Not that he's told me, no.
No. Okay.
If he does, I wouldn't know then.
Yeah. How is he finding it?
He's found it quite hard, actually. Again, he's kind of more thinking, my God, if it was...
Yeah.
Or again, knowing how hard it'd be for his mum at the moment. Because Becky was almost like her daughter to her.
Yeah.
When it is.
And then over the weekend, have either you or Nathan been involved in searching for Becky or doing any of that?
No, I wasn't aware they were doing a search. I didn't realise until, I think it was yesterday.
Yeah.
I went on my Facebook and obviously there was news articles and pictures popped up about that they did the search. But we weren't told about it at all.
Well, that's fine. I said to Nathan, that's actually a good thing. Where did you guys go then over the weekend? I don't know if you're able to remember that far back.
Well, the weekend that Becky, after
Becky went missing. I think if I help you, so I think it was on Monday actually that you spoke to police officers, detectives.
Which would have been outside my mum's house.
That's right.
So I would have went to my mum's that day.
So that was on Monday.
I think I went over on Tuesday.
Where did you stay on Monday night? Do you remember?
It would have been at my house, but we didn't leave until about midnight, to be honest.
So left about midnight
Yeah,
Monday.
most nights we did. Tuesday we went over again.
Yeah.
Again, probably would have left about midnight.
Yeah.
Wednesday, I think we stayed in my house. We might have gone over again Wednesday actually, sorry, I think. Thursday which was yesterday.
That was yesterday.
Yeah, we had the interview, and then obviously we've gone over again today. Yeah, because Wednesday we started watching a film or two films that my mum fell asleep and we didn't leave until like 2 o'clock in the morning or something.
On Wednesday.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah.
Thursday, yeah.
And then Thursday we obviously had the interview, and then today.
I'm sure you picked up on a few things. The complete lack of any emotion, any care or concern. I don't
believe that Shauna has the ability to express these emotions and doesn't understand them, hence why her presentation is so bizarre. I mean, your partner's stepsister, who you know well, has gone missing and you didn't realise people were out looking. I don't know about you, but if someone I cared about went missing, you couldn't drag me away from searching every single nook and cranny.
I'd have pounded the streets every minute of every day. The police also noticed this strange presentation, as well as the fact that Nathan and Shauna's stories match perfectly. Human memory is bad. People can have widely different recollections of the same incident, so having two people give exactly the same story is suspicious, and it was clear they'd both come up with the story and rehearsed it, which was basically they went to the house, didn't see Becky, but heard the door slam, so assumed that she just left. I imagine it was at this point the police knew that Becky was not alive anymore, and they had spoken to the people responsible, but they needed evidence to make the arrest. Police returned to Becky's property and found a small amount of blood outside her bedroom door with a fingerprint in it. The blood was found to be Becky's, and the fingerprint belonged to Nathan. This was enough, and Nathan and Shauna were arrested for kidnapping on the 28th of February 2015, and, with their in police custody, their house was forensically examined. These photos show the inside of the property that Shauna and Nathan and I assume their daughter lived in. It's actually disgusting. There's piles of rubbish everywhere. However, the police noticed the bath was actually spotless. By making this one area spotless, it acted like a massive beacon, and the police knew that someone had gone to great lengths to clean this room for some reason, and obviously it would later be discovered that Becky had been dismembered in the bath. The pair had spent days cleaning up the horrific scene. Police also found receipts for the circular saw used to dismember Becky, as well as gloves, goggles, and other items used in this despicable crime. On the 2nd of March 2015, both Nathan and Shauna, who remained in police custody, were arrested on suspicion of Becky's murder. On the 2nd of March 2015, after days of questioning, with all the evidence stacking up against him, Nathan Matthews gave the following prepared statement to the police, which reads, quote, "I, Nathan Charles Matthews, date of birth 9th of January 1987, accept that I am responsible for the death of Rebecca Watts. On the 19th of February 2015, I attended 18 Crown Hill with my girlfriend Shauna Hoare. 18 Crown Hill is where my mother lives with Darren Galsworthy. Rebecca Watts also lived there. Shauna is my mother's registered carer, so we regularly go to the house to help with housework and help with my mother's needs. Although we usually went on Monday, Wednesdays and Fridays, we'd also go there on other days. On Thursday the 19th of February, part of the reason for going around was to return a tin to my grandmother. My grandmother was due to take my mother to a medical appointment and bring her back. In my car, I had a large bag, a stun device, handcuffs, tape and mask. I developed an idea to scare Rebecca by kidnapping her. I wanted to kidnap her to teach her a lesson. I believed that she was selfish and her behaviour towards my mother was a risk to her health. When we got to 18 Crown Hill, we let ourselves in with a key my mother had left in the recycling box. Upon entering the property, we all went to the front room. A few minutes after arriving, Shauna said she wanted a cigarette and went to the garden. I went to the boot of my car and took out a bag which contained the other items. I took everything upstairs to the landing. I think I then took the items out of the bag before knocking on Rebecca's door. She replied, "What?" or "Hello?" and I said, "Can I see you a minute?" or similar words. Rebecca then opened the door. I am wearing a mask. I cannot be sure in what order things happened immediately after she came to the door, but I used the items I had to subdue Rebecca. During a short struggle, my mask slipped and Rebecca was able to see my face. This caused me to panic, and I strangled her when she was partially in the bag. I collected the items I'd used, put them and Rebecca into the bag, and zipped up the bag. I also took her phone, tablet, and laptop, together with shoes, some clothes, and a duvet cover from the spare room in a separate bag. I took everything downstairs. I put it into the boot of my car. Back in the house, I waited to hear Shauna, then slammed the front door shut. Before going to the front door, I checked that Shauna was not in that room. The rest of the day at the house goes as it would normally if we were there. We leave at around 7 p.m. The rest of the evening passed as usual, but I cannot remember exactly what we did. After Shauna went to bed and sleep, I waited a while, went out to the car and brought the bags into the house. The following day, we went back to 18 Crown Hill, and I tried to behave as normal. I tried to behave as normal as I could. When we returned to 14 Cotton Mill Lane, I again waited for Shauna to go to sleep. This time, I collected the bag of Rebecca's body and placed it in the bath. In order to stop Shauna using the bathroom the following morning, I poured drain cleaner down the toilet so I could tell Shauna it was blocked again. The toilet would often get blocked, and when this happened, I knew Shauna would not go into the bathroom. I also locked the door. My memory of the days that followed is not perfect, so I'm not sure which day I returned to 14 Cotton Mill Lane, having left Shauna at her mother's, but I think it was the Saturday. When I got back to 14 Cotton Mill Lane, I tried to dispose of the body by cutting it up with a circular saw. Initially, I wrapped up the body parts and took them downstairs and hid them. I'm not sure how many days later, but on another day, I took the body, the saw, and other items to 9 Barton Court, Barton Hill, and placed them in a garden shed. I took them to this address with 2 other people. I did not tell them what was in the bags and box, and I said I would collect them in a few days. Both these people are men, but I do not want to name them. I've chosen to give my account by means of a written statement because I believe I have mental health and learning difficulties that make it difficult for me to say it out loud. So to summarise, Nathan is claiming manslaughter. He had some ridiculous plan to kidnap Becky to teach her a lesson because she was being mean to his mother. She struggled and he strangled her in a moment of panic. Also note that he's trying to claim Shauna is innocent and had nothing to do with any part of this, which is ridiculous, as I've already hinted at but will return to in a bit. This confession is so stupid. I mean, literally, he should have just written the word derp on a piece of paper and it would make more sense. Anyway, this clip shows around 10 minutes of the interview with Nathan, when the police then tried to question him about the statement he had made. This is one of the most pathetic interviews I've ever seen. This is a man who methodically cut his 16-year-old stepsister into pieces and was smirking during his first police interviews. But now, notice the change in him. Notice the performance, the manipulation. Now he's poor little Nathan. He did a bad thing because Becky was being mean to everyone. Oh, and he has mental health issues and learning difficulties, don't forget. And he's very, very upset. I'm really sorry.
This interview is being recorded at Patchway Police Station in Bristol. It is now Tuesday, the 3rd of March 2015, and it's exactly 12 midday. I'm DC 3302, Marie Stephen, and the other police officer present is
DC Mark Luther 2702.
Nathan, can you give us your full name?
Nathan Charles Matthews.
Thank you. And your date of birth?
The 9th of the 1st, 1987.
Thank you. And the other people present in the interview are?
Robin Rowland on behalf of Crossroads Sisters.
And Liz Warlock, appropriate adult.
Thank you. So Nathan, we've had a short break. Perhaps if I just flag up for the recording what this interview is about. It's about the kidnap and murder of Becky Watts. Over the last couple of days we've had 4 recordings. The last was a very short recording, and I know you needed to have a break then. I explained to you this morning why we needed to, rather than simply take at face value the written statement that you have given to us last night, that we need to explore what you've told us some more. I know that was difficult for you first thing this morning, but that's what we need to carry on and do, and ask you some more questions.
Can you rephrase? I don't know what questions you need to ask, but obviously you said something about Shauna. Can you rephrase it?
Mm-hmm.
So you can include basically everybody in it and not use her name. Like,
do you want me to say
I think, yeah.
like
the other person? Is it just saying the name?
Just include everybody in it. Like,
Yeah.
obviously she's in. Obviously it will be included in it, but include everybody. Don't say her name.
Okay. Okay. I'll do my best to avoid using that name where I can, Nathan, okay? I can't make promises, and what I would say to you is that I'm not going to be doing anything to deliberately wind you up or anything like that, okay? But we've obviously been here a long time, and if I make a slip up, it may well be because I'm tired and those things happen, okay? Can you tell me then, Nathan, because if we work through what you told us in this written statement, this idea that
You
had...
obviously used, I think you wanted more detail.
Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah, I do.
Obviously I should be able to go into more detail.
Mm-hmm.
Remember the discussion we had before Can We Begin, though?
Huh?
Remember the discussion we had before Can We Begin?
I don't know.
There are a couple of
Are
ways...
you gonna have to read that statement?
No. There are a couple of ways we could get around this.
Obviously, I don't want that to be read to someone.
I don't want to read this out in full again, Nathan, but what I wanted to do was get some more detail from you about things that you've said in it. So perhaps if I could pull out some things from what you've told us and ask you to expand on it, tell us a bit more. Does that sound all right? How about if we start with this idea you had about scaring Becky? Tell me about how that started up then, how you got that idea.
I don't know if it was on TV or something like that, but obviously I had a couple of dreams about...
I think at this point, I can't keep interrupting, but do you remember the discussions we had before you came into interview? And how you and I discussed you dealing with the interview?
What was the question again?
About the idea that you got, and you said it might have been something on TV or you had a dream.
Well, obviously I came up with the idea to scare her, because, like, to try and basically make her more appreciative of life, so she'd be more appreciative for other people. She'd be, like, grateful that, you know, she wasn't harmed or anything like that, or, you know, because obviously she'd leave things out on the floor of my mum to trip over, and obviously would talk to her, like, so saying nasty comments and talk to her like dirt on the floor. And I thought if I was, you know, able to scare her, and obviously her not be harmed and obviously be released. Obviously when she got back, she obviously would have been scared and more appreciative of things. as people are.
Okay. So tell me what you thought you were going to do. What your plan was.
So obviously stick her in the suitcase. Obviously, put tape around her mouth so she wouldn't make any noise. And then
I don't want to interrupt you, Nathan, but just one thing, it might be difficult to hear this later. Do you reckon you could speak up a bit?
obviously, the plan was obviously once I got her in the car to make up something to say to Shauna, obviously I had to leave, like to help someone or do something. And obviously I was gonna I was thinking of like a wooded area or whatever to obviously take her back out, to obviously still have the mask on, and obviously like scare her and, you know, say something along the lines of, you know, you've got to start treating people better, you know, not being a bitch or self-centered, and then like make a threat of or this could happen again or worse or something like that. And obviously I hadn't figured out exactly how to obviously walk away after without obviously, I don't know if she'd try and follow. I'm assuming she wouldn't have followed because out of fear we wouldn't want to follow someone who just obviously has done that, and obviously would have come back. But I would have obviously chucked away obviously everything first and then come back, and obviously would have acted as normal. Kept going back to my mum's, and obviously acted as normal.
So when did you think all of this up?
I can't be certain. I'm no good with dates. I've said this repeatedly, and days muddle into other days. I don't have a specific memory of coming up with it, but I remember thinking about it a couple of times. Just basically trying to think of ways to, because obviously she won't listen to me about leaving shit on the floor for my mum to trip up on. She doesn't listen to her dad about it. Just trying to find a way of making her actually listen.
Had you had a conversation with her soon before that?
I can't remember when I last saw her. Like I said in the statement, it could have been Wednesday when we went over, or it could have been the Monday before. It depends on when she was in and when she wasn't in, and if she was in, it depends on when she would have come down.
Nathan, do you think you want some legal advice at this stage, given that this is going differently than we discussed?
I don't know, probably here.
Okay. It's 12:11 p.m.
Pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. The whiny noises that come from this creature, with him clearly trying to gain as much sympathy as possible. Nathan's quote-unquote confession meant that finally, on March the 3rd, 2015, police attended the home of J. Dean Parsons and Carl Demetrius at 9 Barton Court, arrested them both for assisting an offender, and recovered the suitcases containing Becky's remains from the shed in their garden. They also recovered suitcases and a rucksack that contained, amongst other things, the power saw, blood-stained safety goggles, a screwdriver, handcuffs, blood-stained drain cleaner bottles, blood-stained pliers, and face masks. Later, in Nathan Shaughner's property, a stun gun was recovered. Based on the discovery and his confession, on the 4th of March 2015, Nathan Matthews was charged with the murder of Becky Watts and remanded into custody to await his day in court. Shauna was charged with perverting the course of justice, basically lying to the police about Nathan's movements, and she was remanded into prison, but this was clearly a holding charge. They knew she was involved and just needed the evidence to prove it. This clip shows part of an interview with Shauna after the discovery of Becky's body, where she denies and deflects and claims no knowledge of anything, no matter how obvious this lie was.
Is there anything else in relation to Becky's body being found at your house?
If they were found at my house, do you know where she was found?
No. Would you know that?
No. That was where it's more of a curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where he would have hid her, so to speak. I don't know.
Okay. Claire, have you got anything to?
Yeah. If I know that you've said about I wouldn't have any evidence on her, no hair, no skin cells or things like that. But that doesn't stop you from not, because you might not have touched, but you not knowing. I'm trying to rephrase this. That doesn't stop you from actually knowing that she was there.
Again,
Do you understand what I'm saying?
I suppose there's no reason that you should or shouldn't believe me. I can just obviously tell you that I genuinely had no idea. I can't even look at him. I was sat in the courtroom today and I just wanted to, I say kill him, that's a bad choice of words. I felt sick looking at him, knowing what he did. And yeah, I didn't always like Becky, but she was a nice enough girl. She was so young.
Shauna didn't realise that she just walked herself into a trap. By claiming that she had not touched anything, if her fingerprints or DNA could be found on any items recovered, they could prove that she was lying. Also, as already outlined, there's clear evidence of them discussing abducting teenage girls, which the police already knew about. Police got a break when they found Shauna's DNA on one of the face masks they recovered, as well as on one of the cases containing Becky's remains, and on bin bags used to wrap her body. So, on the 22nd of June 2015, Shauna Hall was also charged with Becky's murder and remained in prison to await her fate. Nathan Matthews and Shauna Hall went on trial on the 6th of October 2015 at Bristol Crown Court. The pathetic waste of skin called Nathan continued with his fucking ridiculous story. His intention was to kidnap Becky in order to teach her a lesson, and that she had been killed whilst trying to do this. He continues to claim that Shauna had no part in this. Shauna echoed this, playing dumb and pretending she had no idea what had gone on. The prosecution had a wealth of evidence to prove their case that this was a, quote, sexually motivated kidnap plot carried out by Nathan and Shauna. Their defences fell apart quickly when it could easily be proven that Nathan had a sexual interest in children, especially ones who looked like Becky, and he and Shauna had discussed about kidnapping a teenage girl. With regards to Shauna, her DNA was found on items that she couldn't possibly have touched unless she was involved. Also, there was the ridiculous idea that she would not have heard a young girl fighting for her life or questioned Nathan carrying a large, heavy bag randomly out of the property on the day that she visited. In addition, as already mentioned, the prosecution argued that Nathan would have needed help moving the body, and this would have come from Shauna. Adding to this, Shauna was shown to be with Nathan during the time he'd been dismembering Becky's body, and not at her mother's. She also went with Nathan to various shops to buy cleaning products, claiming that she didn't know what this was for. Lastly, there was also her online internet activity, including finding a parody song which referenced hiding a body. The case was so strong that it only took the jury 3 hours to find Nathan Matthews guilty of the murder of Becky Watts, and due to her role, Shauna Hall was found guilty of her manslaughter. In addition, both were convicted of conspiracy to kidnap, perversion of the course of justice, preventing the lawful burial of a body, and possession of 2 stun guns, whilst Nathan was also convicted of possession of indecent images of children. In addition, Jadine Parsons and Carl Demetrius, the couple whose shed was used to hide Becky's body, were convicted of assisting an offender, and J. Dean was subsequently sent to prison for 16 months. Carl was sent down for 2 years. With regards to Nathan and Shauna, on the 13th of November 2015, they stood before Mr. Justice Dingmans for sentencing. He was barely able to contain his emotions and was later seen to leave the court in tears. He stated that Nathan and Shauna's crimes, including dismembering Becky, were actions that, quote, defy any reasonable explanation. He highlighted the clear sexual motivation for this crime, and whilst there was no evidence to indicate that Shauna had actually been the one to kill Becky, she was shown to be an integral part of this plan. He also said, quote, Mr. Matthews and Miss Hall lied to the family and to the police, pretending not to know anything about Becky's whereabouts at a time when they were in the process of dismembering her. Their deceit of the family was particularly cruel and unusual, and the family's sense of betrayal by Nathan Matthews and Shauna Hall is both understandable and justified. At the same time they were deceiving the family, Matthews and Hall were watching a parody of a song from Frozen, using the words, "Do you want to hide a body?" It's apparent that neither Nathan Matthews or Shauna Hall have truthfully said what happened at 18 Crown Hill to Becky, and I understand the family's sense of frustration about that fact. He then sentenced them. For the murder of Becky Watts, Nathan Matthews was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum tariff of 33 years before he's eligible to apply for parole. For the manslaughter of Becky Watts, Shauna Hall was sentenced to 17 years imprisonment. Both later appealed their sentences, but they were both denied. People who offend against children are considered the lowest of the low in prison, and some measure of retribution was waiting for Nathan and Shauna after they were sentenced. With regards to Nathan, in January 2017, he was reported to have been badly burnt when another inmate threw boiling hot water over him at the high-security prison H&P Long Larton. Shauna appears to have had an even worse time than Nathan. In 2016, it was stated that she'd been beaten so badly by other inmates that she'd had to be resuscitated twice. It appears, though, that Shauna survived prison, and given she would have had to have served half her sentence before being released on licence, and taking into account time on remand, she's likely already out of prison or will soon be released on licence to be monitored by probation for the next 8.5 years. No doubt she'll have to keep a very low profile now and for the rest of her life. Nathan has another 25 years before he can even apply for parole if he survives that long. But, given the heinous nature of his crimes, whether he will ever be considered safe to be released is unclear. Becky Watts was laid to rest on the 17th of April 2015 at St Ambrose Church in Whitehall in Bristol. Hundreds of people lined the streets, and, at a request from her family, many wore t-shirts featuring her photograph and threw pink roses towards the horse-drawn carriage which took her on her final journey. Becky's grave was decorated with blue chippings, her favourite colour, and the inscription on her gravestone reads, quote, Bristol's Angel, Becky, Rebecca Marie Watts, beautiful, affectionate, talented, loyal daughter and friend, taken from us 19th of February 2015, age 16. Bex was loved by everyone, will be missed by all who knew her. Rest in peace, my child. Tanya Watts, Becky's biological mother, did not feel able to attend the service, who paid tribute to her daughter by calling her a, quote, caring, normal, happy, lovely girl, as well as saying, you shouldn't have to bury a child. There are lots of people on this earth who don't deserve to be here, but Becky weren't one of them. She should be here. Her father Darren and her stepmother Angie were devastated by Becky's death and the ultimate betrayal of both Nathan and Shauna. Darren subsequently released a statement speaking for both he and Angie, which read in part, quote, we both feel we are just marking off time until our demise. Everything beautiful in our lives has been ripped from us in one selfish act of violence. The pain cuts deep into our families. It's destroyed long-standing relationships and marriages. Our children have become isolated and bullied at school. We can't go outside of the house without people pointing at us or making comments which they believe we can't hear. When I close my eyes to sleep, I see Becky's death over and over again. I see what they did to my child. I hear her cry out, "What are you doing?" Then I feel her terror as she realizes they're not going to stop, and she is about to die. I feel her heart racing. I see all this, and I'm powerless to help her. All too frequently, I awake drenched in sweat and physically shaking. Becky was so small and fragile. She never stood a chance. These nightmares consume my every thought. Like advanced cancer, they haunt my days and terrorize my nights. This is the reality of what transpired that day. A legacy I cannot escape. This is my life now. Dow and Alta spoke later about seeing his daughter for the last time, and despite the efforts of the morticians who had sewn Becky back together and wrapped the cuts in bandages, he said he could still see where his daughter had been decapitated. Angie's health declined rapidly after this point, losing the girl she loved like a daughter and raising a monster of a son who could do this. She completely cut Nathan out of her life. I have no real updates about either Darren or Angie. I know they remained married for several years after this incident, but I'm not sure where they are now. However, what is known is that a beautiful young woman who had so much of her life ahead of her was murdered, taken from this life before she'd even had a chance to live it. She wasn't just taken away from my loved ones, but she was robbed of her opportunity to have a family. They destroyed all the laughter, the joy she would have had, her chance to make a mark on the world, which I've no doubt she would have done. Becky, with all my heart, I hope you're at peace. Sleep well, Angel. It's impossible not to talk about these two together, but I'll also discuss differences in their profiles. Nathan Matthews, in my opinion, is much easier to understand. A sad little man who, likely due to his own inadequacies, including his height, wanted to dominate and control women as a way to feel powerful. He likely felt that on a level, he was no match for a woman, had little to offer them, and they would inevitably abandon him. So he targeted children. He knew these individuals would be more naive than him, and he could mold them into what he wanted them to be. Becky was a precocious teenager who knew her own mind, had a strong personality, and was going places compared to him. A man who could not hold down a job, who lived in absolute squalor. This disparity enraged him. He was also sexually obsessed with her and wanted to dominate her and take what he believed he was entitled to. His plan would enable him to achieve both of these goals, use Becky sexually and remove this object from his life. And I say object purposefully. I have no doubt that Nathan is a psychopath. He has no remorse for his actions, saw Becky and all women and female children simply as things he could use. He methodically dismembered the body of a 16-year-old child and then sat in an interview with the police smirking. Only when he was trying to save himself did he show any sort of emotion, and this was manufactured, a pantomime, with his sole purpose being to sell this bullshit story to save his own skin. Nathan Matthews is a dangerous man who I think will always pose a risk to children. In some respects, I find the profile of Shauna Hall more interesting, as it is, in my opinion, far more complex. I've said what I thought about her during this video, with Shauna being a victim initially, falling into the hands of a manipulative, controlling predatory paedophile who moulded her for years, contributing to the monster she became. However, the more I watch her interviews, the more I'm convinced that Nathan merely built upon something that was already within Shauna, or, to be more accurate, missing from her. She is cold. There is something missing when she speaks. She talks, but there is no emotion there. She's literally like a robot. She shows no signs of distress and seems incapable of even pretending to care during her police interviews. I think she too is likely a psychopath, who over the years began to also become sexually aroused by thoughts of abducting children for Nathan to abuse. The thing that I think cements my perception of these two as psychopaths is, as I said, the fact they were parents themselves to a female child. Especially with Shauna. Becoming a mother appears to have done nothing to change her. She did not then realise the love that other mothers have for their children, and how losing a child is the worst thing a parent can experience. She gave no consideration to keeping that child out of harm's way, or being in their life. No, instead, she allowed them to live in absolute squalor, and took them to an address knowing exactly what was going to happen. And then, likely had this child in the house where Becky's body was cut up. The same thing goes for Nathan. He couldn't give a shit about anyone else, including his daughter. His needs to indulge his sick sexual interest in children was all that mattered. I've read that Shauna was apparently pregnant again with twins when Becky was murdered. So, again, rather than thinking about the lives inside of her and our daughter, she was slowly focused on helping her paedophile partner end the life of someone else's child. As to what happened to these twins, a report in late 2015 said that Shauna was, quote, no longer pregnant. It's unclear whether she had termination, lost the babies, or potentially she was never pregnant at all, and simply said this to gain sympathy. In addition, I have no idea what happened to the couple's daughter. She'll be around 10 years old now, and I really hope that she's being supported by people who love her, and they'll help her with the emotional fallout when she finds out what monsters her parents were. Shauna, as I said, is either released or will soon be back in the world, and she will have to keep a low profile and look over her shoulder for the rest of her life. And Nathan, he gets to enjoy at least the next 25 years with his new friends. Let's see how that goes. There are clear parallels between this case and the Ken and Barbie murders. This case relates to a couple, Carla Homolka and Paul Bernardo. Bernardo was a serial rapist and serial killer who killed at least 3 young women, with Carla assisting him in finding him victims, including her 15-year-old sister, Tammy. I will be covering that case in the near future. On the 26th of May 2013, 22-year-old Jamie Reynolds lured his friend, 17-year-old Georgia Williams, to his home on Avondale Road in the town of Wellington in Shropshire, a county in the UK. This is under the pretense of her helping him with a photo shoot so he'd become a professional photographer. Georgia didn't know that she'd walked into a trap set by a deviant, extremely dangerous sexual sadist who has spent years fantasizing about hanging a girl and then having sex with their dead body. Georgia agreed to a photo shoot with a noose around her neck, not knowing the setup was real. Reynolds pulled the rope and hanged Georgia whilst kicking away what she was standing on. He then watched her slowly strangled to death in front of him before violating her body. Reynolds had planned this day in great detail for months, and the police recovered a story that he'd written about Georgia and what he was going to do to her, which included the line, quote, "I can't wait to see you dance for me. I like my girls dead." At his sentencing, it was assessed that Reynolds was a serial killer in the making, a man who had been stopped before he'd ended the lives of others. But a serious case review showed the incompetence of various agencies and the fact the warning flags were obvious for years, but no one acted on them. Welcome to Evil Among Us. Jamie Reynolds was born in either 1990 or 1991 in the county of Shropshire, in the West Midlands of England. There was some trauma in his early years, with him being exposed to his biological father, beating his mother, as well as him being physically and emotionally abused by him, but his mother eventually fled the family home and began a relationship with a man who had become Reynolds' stepfather. This man, in contrast, was very supportive, and Reynolds spent most of his childhood in a middle-class household living in the town of Wellington. His mother and stepfather later tried to raise the alarm about his behaviour to authorities, so it seems he came from a pro-social household. However, despite this outwardly stable upbringing, from around the age of 16 years old, Reynolds began down a path of sexual depravity, which was originally confined to the internet, but then spilled out into the real world. Court records show that for years prior to the murder, Reynolds was obsessed with extreme pornography and had been addicted to this since he was around the age of 16, but he likely started looking at this even earlier. Records released after his sentence show that Reynolds frequently visited YouTube channels which showed violent scenes from films, especially those where women were murdered. This progressed through him following channels which uploaded videos showing simulated acts of violence against women, especially strangulation, with titles such as, quote, "Girl strangled by boyfriend," "Two ladies strangled on bed," and "Strangled by husband." Eventually, Reynolds progressed to watching snuff films, videos depicting real-life death, including murder and horrific accidents. He signed up to various adult dating websites, looking for sexual partners who he could use and abuse. On one of these, he stated his favourite porn genre was, quote, choking. Reynolds was found to have bookmarked numerous websites which showed extreme pornography, including simulated rape. One video that he kept returning to showed a man choking a woman using a piece of rope and then having sex with her unconscious body. Many of the videos that Reynolds watched had terrible echoes of what he himself did years later. It's clear that Reynolds was obsessed with acts of physical and sexual violence towards women, particularly strangulation and then rape. Both these acts are rooted in power and control. The act of strangulation is very personal, up-close behaviour. It's an extremely visual act, with the perpetrator being able to look into their victim's eyes, while they, the one in ultimate control, chokes the life out of them and sees the light going out of their eyes. And then, whether unconscious or dead, they're at the ultimate mercy of the perpetrator, who can use them any way they want, and they cannot fight back. In the case of Reynolds, it's clearly found the stress of these women sexually arousing, and wanted desperately to be the one with his hands around their throats. Soon, Reynolds' online fantasies began bleeding into the real world. He began taking photographs of girls he knew from social media, and ones he himself took, and began to superimpose pictures of nooses around these girls' necks. Reynolds would claim to be an amateur photographer to friends, as cover for him taking pictures of these girls. In addition, police recovered 40 graphic short stories which he'd written, again about girls he knew, where the theme was always the same, with these girls being strangled, either to the point of unconsciousness or death, with Reynolds then having sex with either their living bodies or their corpses, but it appears his fantasies mainly revolved around the latter. By the age of 17 years old, Jamie Reynolds was ready to take his fantasies into the real world, and this is when he made his first attempt to kill and rape a girl. And it's also the beginning of the story about the ineptitude of the authorities, which allowed this predator to remain at liberty. In January 2008, Reynolds, aged around 17, lured a 16-year-old girl back to his home with the promise of paying her money if she would pose for some pictures for him. He'd clearly been fantasizing about attacking this girl, as he had superimposed an image of a noose onto a picture of her. When she got to the property, it's clear that she felt something was wrong, and when she refused to go upstairs or into the kitchen, Reynolds attacked her, placing his hands around her throat and attempting to strangle her. She managed to fight Reynolds off and flee the house and called the police. When the police arrived, the girl was found with swelling and red marks around her neck. When the police entered Reynolds' home, they found pictures of unknown, naked females being strangled and suffocated, and pictures of girls that he knew, including the 16-year-old he just attacked, with nooses superimposed onto their pictures. Reynolds was arrested simply for assault, and later spoken to when he simply claimed not to remember the incident well. He assured the police he had no interest in viewing pornography in the future and was not interested in strangulation. For some inexplicable reason, Jamie Reynolds was simply given a final warning and sent on his way. Around this same time, Reynolds' mother and stepfather contacted the mental health services about their concerns related to the contents of his computer. Reynolds was assessed by a doctor who, after speaking to him and seeing the pictures, determined that he posed a, quote, significant risk to others. And then, nothing. Absolutely nothing. It appears that mental health services simply sat back to see what would happen. It doesn't appear there was any information sharing with the police or anyone else. Instead, they told Reynolds' parents to go to the police to raise concerns themselves. His stepfather duly went to the police with printouts of photographs he found on Reynolds' computer, including the images of nooses superimposed on girls that he knew, and pornographic images of a man raping, then strangling a girl to death. He told them that he was concerned what his stepson might be capable of. The police simply noted this interaction on their system, but did nothing. They didn't link the two incidents, and realised they needed to look again at Reynolds, and conclude correctly that the incident involving the 16-year-old girl was far more serious than they'd originally believed, although, in my opinion, this was blatantly obvious. The pieces that different agencies held show that Jamie Reynolds was, by the age of 17 years old, an extremely dangerous young man who was clearly a potential rapist and likely murderer in the making, but there was no communication and no one took the lead on trying to stop him. In addition, despite Reynolds being found with pictures of girls he knew, clearly potential targets, none of them were warned, and they only found out about the disturbing images after his arrest for murder. The issue with this lack of action is that someone like Reynolds basically becomes more emboldened. He'd basically tried to strangle a 16-year-old girl, got caught, and there was absolutely no consequence to his actions. I think that Reynolds took this as a green light to escalate his behaviour, which he did with horrifying consequences only 5 years later. Reynolds was able to wear some semblance of a mask of sanity in public, but he was known as an odd, creepy individual. He would fixate on women and repeatedly ask them out, even if they had boyfriends, or repeatedly refuse his advances. He appears to have been a fantasist, creating scenarios in his head where he was already in relationships with these women, despite them being clear they were not interested. When he finally got the hint, he would post self-pitying messages online, stating that he was, quote, cursed, and, quote, whenever I arrange dates, they either never happen or the girl magically gains a boyfriend. He was clearly a man who had difficulty taking no for an answer, and this would come to a head in 2011 when he harassed a girl repeatedly trying to get her to go out with him. It got to the point where she confronted him to tell him to leave her alone. In response, Reynolds reversed his car into this girl. Police were called, but I cannot see this led to any formal action, but also no link was made between this incident and the offence in 2008 or the concerns reported by his parents. It was later found out this girl was the subject of one of Reynolds' stories and featured in one of the photographs found on his computer with a noose superimposed around her neck. Clearly, Jamie Reynolds was a man who felt entitled to these women, seeing them as objects, and no doubt, if they had agreed to go out with him, they would have quickly been subjected to serious acts of sexual violence. If they rejected him, they'd be punished. How dare they stop him from getting what he wanted? Reynolds appears to have been obsessed with many girls, but he had a particular fixation with a girl called Georgia Williams. Georgia Williams was born on the 8th of September 1995 in Shropshire and was, by all accounts, an extroverted, kind and popular young lady. She grew up in a happy and loving home with her father Stephen, a police officer, her mother Lynette and her sister Scarlett. Stephen later described his daughter as a, quote, sweet and loving girl. She was bullied in junior school, but didn't let this change her personality. And when she went to Urkelwood Technology College in Telford, she became a student mentor and a student counsellor, and in her last year, when taking her GCSEs, she became head girl. She was also a Royal Air Force cadet, had aspirations of being a medic in the armed forces. It's clear that Georgia was a person who wanted to help others and wanted to devote her professional life to this. However, it was this caring personality trait that would eventually lead her to fall into Reynolds' trap. The pair lived around 5 minutes away from each other and met in the Haygate pub in Wellington, which put on live music. How long they knew each other is unclear, but it doesn't appear it was long, likely less than a year before the murder. Reynolds took an instant shine to Georgia and asked her out repeatedly, despite her making it clear that she wasn't interested in him in that way. He went online to moan about how hard done by he was, that Georgia would not go out with him, leading to one person responding, quote, get over it, grow up. However, as I've already mentioned, Reynolds was not a man who took no for an answer. And, whilst outwardly he stayed calm and passive, she'd become the focus of one of his disturbing stories, and he had superimposed a noose onto a picture of her and restraints on her wrists, and by January 2013, he'd begun to plot her murder. Towards the end of January 2013, Jamie Reynolds began writing a story entitled, quote, Georgia Williams in Surprise. I know that title doesn't make any sense, but that's what it was called. He revised and rewrote parts of it until approximately the 2nd of May 2013, 3 weeks before the murder. In this story, he described how he convinced Georgia to come to his house, wearing her red hair up in a ponytail and wearing red lipstick. He then described her performing oral sex on him in the kitchen, before blindfolding her, tying her hands together, and telling her he had a surprise for her. He then wrote about taking her upstairs and getting her to stand on a box whilst placing a noose around her neck, before tightening it, whilst telling her that she was going to, quote, dance for him, referring to the spasmodic leg movements seen on hanging victims whilst they suffocate. Reynolds then described tightening the noose whilst sexually assaulting Georgia, and then continued to do this when he kicked the box away whilst watching her slowly die from strangulation. When she was dead, he talks about having sex with her body. Reynolds went to great lengths to obtain the items he needed for his sick plan. He bought a black leather jacket and shorts, which he intended for his victim to wear, and filmed himself masturbating over this clothing. He also ordered handcuffs, rope, and cable ties. He also worked on constructing a bar that he could hang a rope from, and achieved this by taking all that was in the attic and wedging it between two walls so he could hang the rope over this. He also undertook research to learn how to make a hangman's noose. All of these items Reynolds had by the middle of February 2013, and whilst Georgia appears to have been his primary target, I've no doubt there was an aborted attempt to follow through with this plan before her tragic death. Specifically, towards the end of February 2013, Reynolds invited a girl round to his house whilst his parents were away for the weekend. She was again someone who appeared in one of his stories, and he'd inevitably been masturbating over the pictures he created of her with a noose around her neck and shackles around her ankles. The girl came to Reynolds' home, and he then locked the front door and claimed he couldn't find the key. The girl refused to move from the hallway, as she inevitably sensed something was wrong. Reynolds was trying to get her to go upstairs, and also to stay the night, but she refused. He spent an hour pretending to look for the key, and by the end of the time, the girl was screaming and threatening to break a window to get out of the property. Reynolds then miraculously found the key, unlocked the door, and the girl fled. Unfortunately, Georgia would not be so lucky. Reynolds' absolute commitment to finding someone to kill is shown by the fact that in May 2013, the month of the murder, he'd sent out messages to approximately 15 girls on Facebook, asking them to help him out with a photo shoot. He told them the shoot would involve a simulated hanging. 2 or 3 girls responded and said they would help, and Reynolds organised for 2 of them to come to his house at the end of May, the day after he committed the murder of Georgia. With regards to Georgia, unfortunately Reynolds played on her good nature, her desire to help others. At this point, he was working various part-time jobs and moaned to her about his lot in life and how he wanted to find a real career. He wanted to become a professional photographer, but in order to do this, he needed a portfolio. He didn't have enough money to pay someone to pose for him. Georgia, wishing to help her friend, said she'd be happy to pose for him. He told her that the photo shoot would involve a simulated hanging and that he would want her to wear specific things, and asked if that would be okay. She said it would be fine. I know inevitably it will come up in the comments about why she agreed to this. I think there are a couple of things to point out. Firstly, her age. She was 17 years old, and perhaps a little naive. But I think the most important thing to say is that hindsight is a wonderful thing. I don't think many of us even think about the potential that we may know someone who's a murderer or a rapist. Even if Georgia had some reservations, I think she just wanted to help out someone that she thought was in need. The date agreed for them to meet was May the 26th, 2013, a day where Reynolds' mother and stepfather were away, and he had the entire house to himself. On the 26th of May 2013, Jamie Reynolds left his job at a shop in Wellington's around 4:15 p.m. He then went to a pub for a drink. He was described by those who saw him as being in a happy mood. He then returned home and began to set the scene for the murder. He wedged the oar between 2 walls upstairs and draped the hangman's noose he'd made over it, with the free end coiled on the floor. He also placed a box under the noose. He then took a picture of this setup, which was recovered later. During this time, he was in contact with Georgia, checking she was still coming round and asking her to wear red lipstick and put her hair up in a ponytail, just like in his story. He also texted the 2 other girls who he'd arranged to meet, asking if they were still available, with him inevitably having backup plans in case George didn't come for any reason. Between 6:15 p.m. and 6:31 p.m, Reynolds sat watching extreme pornography, including videos showing women being strangled, with their hands tied behind their back, or hanging from a beam. Another video he watched showed a man strangling a woman and then having sex with her apparently dead body. This material he took from his collection, which, by the point of the murder, had expanded to 72 videos and 16,800 still images. Georgia left her home at about 7:50 p.m, telling her parents that she was going to Reynolds' address, that she was going to model for some photographs for him. She arrived around 7:55 and changed into the leather jacket and shorts that Reynolds had bought. Reynolds documented every moment, no doubt to revisit it later, by taking pictures from the moment that Georgia walked through the door. These photographs have not been released to the public for obvious reasons, given what they went on to show, but they are described in court records. The first images show Georgia, smiling, wearing the outfit stood in Reynolds' kitchen. The next set, a few minutes later, shows Georgia stood on the box, with a noose around her neck, with her hands apparently secured behind her back. She's again still smiling. At some point between 8:28 p.m. and 8:50 p.m, Jamie Reynolds grabbed the loose end of the rope and pulled it taut, forcing Georgia onto her tiptoes, so she began to strangle. He tied the rope to a banister and watched her gasping for breath. After watching this for several minutes, he untied the rope and pulled it with all of his might, so Georgia was fully suspended in the air. He lightly also knocked the box out from under her, and he sat and watched her die. The next set of photographs must have been nothing short of horrific to see, as they showed Georgia suspended, clearly dead by this point. Over the next 2 hours, Reynolds engaged in various sex acts with Georgia's dead body, including raping her orally, vaginally and anally, with him taking her corpse from room to room to degrade her body in various locations. He photographed all of his sickening acts. Reynolds also took items of Georgia's jewellery as some kind of sick trophy and hid them somewhere, with them never being recovered. When he was finished, he set about covering his tracks and trying to get away with his crime. Reynolds had apparently learnt the passcode on Georgia's mobile phone. How is unclear, but he accessed this device and sent a message to her mother saying that she decided to stay at a friend's house and be back sometime tomorrow. Reynolds also texted the 2 girls he was meant to meet the next day and cancelled his plans. He also wiped his devices. Reynolds then loaded Georgia's body, the clothing that he bought her, and the rope into his stepfather's work van. He planned to dump Georgia's body, but had to wait until after his sister had come around for a pre-arranged visit on the morning of May the 27th, 2013. After she had gone, he drove the van to a remote area of woodland outside the city of Wrexham in Wales, a journey of around 40 miles. On the way, he stops at a service station for petrol, as shown by this CCTV, which is haunting. Note that he's standing mere feet from the broken and violated body of a 17-year-old girl that he'd savagely murdered. He then dumped her body, but Reynolds made a fatal mistake when his van got stuck in the mud and he had to be helped by a passing driver. Another motorist, although I'm not sure why, took a photograph of the van by the side of the road. So, what did Reynolds do after this? Did he panic? No, he bought himself a new watch and went to the cinema. Those who saw him and came forward later said he was acting completely normally, like a man without a care in the world. However, Reynolds knew that questions would be asked, and so he fled to Glasgow in Scotland and checked himself into a hotel. He'd already concocted a feeble excuse as to why he travelled there. He was depressed and had gone there to kill himself. So he travelled almost 300 miles away from home to kill himself. Right, that seems logical. However, his time on the run would be short-lived. Unfortunately, due to the text message that Reynolds had sent, her family didn't start to worry about Georgia until the 27th of May 2013. When she didn't return on this date, they desperately contacted her friends to see if anyone had seen her. On the 28th of May, she was reported to the police as a missing person. It didn't take long to form the link between Reynolds and Georgia, as he was apparently the last person she was going to visit before her disappearance. His route to Glasgow was traced. He was found to have checked into a hotel in the city centre, which is where he was arrested on the 29th of May 2013, initially on suspicion of kidnapping. This was just 3 days after the murder. Officers from West Mercia Police made appeals to locate Georgia and asked the public to help trace the movements of the van that Reynolds was driving. The person who took the photograph of him stuck by the road contacted the authorities and gave them the image, placing Reynolds in an area outside Wrexham. The police also searched his home and seized various items, including electrical devices, such as computer and memory sticks. On the 30th of May 2013, Reynolds was transported down south and was questioned over 2 days on suspicion of kidnapping Georgia. Reynolds stuck to his ridiculous story that he'd gone to Scotland to kill himself, but the police had already built a strong case against him quickly. They confronted him with the images they've recovered of Georgia dead from his memory stick, despite his attempts to delete them, as well as the image of him standing by the road near woods in Wales. Reynolds then changed his story, stated that he had flashes of memory of him dragging Georgia through some woods, but he couldn't remember how he got there or what had happened before that. Whilst police were questioning Reynolds on the second day, the 31st of May 2013, they had launched a search of the area in Wales where the photograph of Reynolds had been taken, and they soon found the body of Georgia. She had simply been dumped in open ground, naked, with no effort to conceal her. The police then had to tell her parents that their daughter was dead. Jamie Reynolds still claimed he couldn't remember anything, but it didn't matter. The case against him was airtight, and late on the 31st of May 2013, he was charged with Georgia Williams' murder and remanded into prison to await his fate. On the 3rd of October 2013, Jamie Reynolds made his first appearance at Birmingham Crown Court, where he pleaded not guilty to the murder of Georgia Williams. However, on the 2nd of December 2013, the first day of his trial, he pleaded guilty to her murder. No doubt he knew the writing was on the wall. He would inevitably be convicted, and his only play was to plead guilty, to try and get time off his sentence. However, he was sorely mistaken. The judge, Mr. Justice Wilkie, adjourned the case of Reynolds to be assessed by a psychiatrist, Professor Peckett, who produced a report for the 19th of December 2013, the day that Reynolds stood to be sentenced. Justice Wilkie highlighted the premeditated and calculated nature of Reynolds' offending, but made particular reference to the psychiatric report, with him stating, quote, "Professor Peckett is of the opinion that you do not suffer from a recognized mental disorder, nor do you have an abnormality of mental functioning. The only narrative that stands up to examination is that you wanted to hang a girl and have sex with her corpse to fulfill a long-standing necrophilic fantasy. He has expressed the opinion that you are intelligent and plausible, are capable of learning new tactics and strategies, and had the potential to progress to being a serial killer. Whilst you pose an ongoing risk to your own life, you also pose a grave risk to women and will continue to do so for the rest of your life." The judge indicated he fully agreed with this assessment. He then sentenced him. For the murder of Georgia Williams, Jamie Reynolds was sentenced to a whole life order, meaning that he will never be released from prison. After his sentence, Reynolds' barrister stated that he had resigned himself to spending the rest of his life in prison. However, he quickly changed his mind, and in April 2014, Jamie Reynolds appealed his length of sentence. This was denied. I've read the refusal of his appeal, and I love this type of legal language, with very flowery and professional words being used to say, hell no, if we could put you under the prison, we would. At the time of his sentencing, Reynolds was only the second person in the UK to be given a whole life order due to killing a single person, as this type of sentence was usually reserved for people who'd committed multiple murders. The first was Mark Bridger, who abducted and murdered 5-year-old April Jones in October 2012 in Wales. Since then, they have both been joined by others, including Thomas Mair, who murdered MP Joe Cox in Bristol, West Yorkshire, on the 16th of June 2016. In addition, there's Michael Adebolajo, who was sentenced to spend the rest of his life in prison in 2014 for the murder of soldier Lee Rigby in May 2013. Also, Wayne Couzens, who, whilst a serving Metropolitan Police officer in London, abducted, raped and murdered 33-year-old Sarah Everard in March 2021. Most recently, Ali Harbi Ali was given a whole life order for killing MP Sir David Ames in Leigh-on-Sea in Essex on the 15th of October 2021. However, Reynolds still remains, I believe, the youngest or potentially one of the youngest offenders to be given a whole life tariff, with him receiving his when he was just 23 years old. I have no information about what Reynolds has been up to in prison. I read an article from a few years ago that says he's in the Monster Mansion, H&P Wakefield, surrounded by the most dangerous and perverted murderers and rapists in the country. So he's in good company then. Reynolds is now around 32 or 33 years old, and so likely has a very long time to enjoy his surroundings, and will hopefully, one day, die behind prison bars, utterly forgotten by the world. The murder of Georgia Williams laid bare serious failings in multi-agency working. The pieces were there, but no one bothered to put them together. It appears that 2 serious case reviews were commissioned, one which solely looked at West Mercia Police's role in this. Both were scathing. The one from the police indicated that potentially disciplinary action was going to be taken towards officers involved in the previous incidents. Whether this happened or not is unclear. The report made the usual recommendations to try and avoid something like this happening again. It's difficult to have faith in reports like this, as serious errors, albeit by other forces, continue to happen. For example, the colossal clusterfuck that was the investigation into the case of Stephen Port. Georgia's parents, Stephen and Lynette, were obviously not only devastated by the loss of their daughter in such horrific circumstances, but also because Reynolds could have been stopped long before he snatched her away from them. I want to play this short clip about their reaction to the reports that were released.
These officers in here shouldn't sleep at nights because they let Georgia down.
Their failings led to our daughter being killed by Reynolds. They killed Georgia by not dealing with him properly, and they should accept some consequences for that.
Even more terrible in this case is the fact that Stephen was a police officer with West Mercia Constabulary. It seems horribly perverse that a man who devoted his life to working for an organisation because he wanted to serve others was let down by that very same organisation when it came to protecting his own family. Georgia Williams was laid to rest on June the 14th, 2013 at St Albans Church in the town of Telford, and her funeral was a sign of the young woman she was, how much she was loved and respected by those who knew her and the community as a whole. Her friends tied turquoise and orange ribbons, her favourite colours, along the entire funeral route. Hundreds of air cadets marched to the church from their headquarters and formed an honour guard for the mourners entering the service. Hundreds of pupils from Urquhart Wood Technology College, where Georgia had previously been a head girl, also attended. 20 police cadets marched into the church in ranks of 2 as the church bells tolled to mark the start of the service. The church, which held 450 people, was full to capacity, and the service was relayed via loudspeakers so the hundreds stood outside who had come to pay their respects. The service started with the song All Things Bright and Beautiful, as this was felt to match Georgia's character, and all the mourners were told to wear bright colours to celebrate her life. Her father Stephen read out a poem written by one of her friends during the service, which went, quote, "We thought of you today, but that is nothing new. We thought of you yesterday, and the days before that too. We think of you in silence. We often speak your name. Now all we have is memories, and your picture in a frame. Your memory is our keepsake, with which we will never part. God now has you in his keeping, Georgia, but we will have you in our hearts." As a sign of the impact this tragedy had on the wider community, on the 17th of August 2013, a minute's applause was held before AFC Telford United's next football match. The club now gives a yearly award, known as the United for Georgia Trophy, to young volunteers at the club. The scale of the outpouring of respect and grief for this young woman is a testament to how much she was loved. I want to conclude this section by reading the statement from her father Stephen on behalf of the family, which they wrote before Reynolds' failed appeal in 2014. His words are more powerful than mine could ever be. Quote, "It's now been 1 year and 5 months since pure evil took Georgia's life in the most cruel and unimaginable way possible. Georgia has now missed 2 birthdays, her 18th and 19th, Christmas and her sister's graduation, and many other family occasions. Each of these days, which should have been joyous occasions, have been filled with grief beyond description for me, Georgia's mum, sister, and the rest of the family. There are no joyous occasions for us anymore. There's just coping. If this isn't enough, we are here today to suffer and put through anguish that we could all do without. To be honest, I'm surprised to be here today to listen to an appeal against the terms of punishment handed down by a Crown Court judge who had obviously considered every aspect of his sentencing options, who explored his reasoning with logic with regard to the laws of this land, with regard to the defendant, with regard to us, and just as importantly, to the rights of the public in the long term. This evil coward obviously doesn't accept that, but what he has to realise is that he was the master of his own destiny when he spent months planning Georgia's death, with such detail and callousness, and then ultimately murdering her. Where is Georgia's right to appeal? Where is our right to appeal against this life sentence that I can only describe as purgatory? There is none, even though I appeal to the highest authority over life and death every night, when I pray to God to give Georgia her life back. A life where she would have continued to make her mark, doing good, serving her country in the RAF, making people happy, sticking up for right against wrong, and most importantly, for us, being part of the family in its journey through life. Georgia never harmed anyone, or ever would. She had save a life on her list for life. She wanted to be a paramedic and serve on the front line with the RAF. I know she would have achieved this and much more. Her life was, and still is, worth indefinitely more than the evil that appeals to this court today. She contributed to life, not took it away. Georgia only went to that house that evening because, in her words, he's a mate, and I don't want to let him down. That was what she told her mum before she left that sunny evening. Evil took advantage of that good nature, that friendship, and used it to its own selfish, perverted pleasure, just for a few fleeting moments of self-gratification. That's all Georgia's friendship and life meant. That was the value put on this precious girl's life. Rot in hell, you inhuman excuse for life. Hope every day, for you, is full of the grief that twists my stomach into knots, that fills me with fear and apprehension, that makes me physically sick, that has no hope of ever going away, but eats further into you as each second of the day goes by. I hope you cry yourself to sleep every night and wake up every morning with the same stinging tears that burn into my eyes. I just wish you could experience the torture I go through every day without hope of even a moment's relief. Your heart should be ripped to shreds like mine, your waking moments restless without peaceful solace, your life empty, and only then you may get somewhere near to what I feel and what torments me with never-ending frustration. Yes, I'm bitter. Yes, I'm twisted. This is what you have done to me, a man with only the needs for his family, and to do whatever good he could in life, and to pass those simple principles on to his children, to continue after he's gone. That is what I and the family suffer. Consider the real victim here. Dare to imagine the unimaginable. Place yourself in Georgia's shoes, with a rope around your neck, with the inevitable knowledge of what is going to happen next. Try and imagine those last moments of life, spent in terror and struggle. Just try. God bless you, Georgia. Dad. The case of Jamie Reynolds is interesting for a number of reasons. Primarily, from my perspective, as a person who wants to understand why people do the things they do, it's the lack of any indication of serious issues in his childhood. As I said during the video, there were some indicators of abuse in Reynolds' childhood, but the psychiatrist who completed the report for his sentence said this was not serious or sustained enough to explain the seriousness of his own behaviour later in life. Obviously, this is an opinion, but I do tend to agree. I cover many cases on here of serial murderers and other violent offenders. A significant trauma in their childhood is usually a factor which has shaped most of them into the people they became. But this isn't true with Reynolds. The more I do these videos, the more I'm becoming convinced that some people are just born evil. I want to clarify what I mean by that. Specifically, I'm coming around to the idea more and more that some people are born with some sort of neurological issues. There's simply something wrong with their brain development. They could be raised in the most loving and caring household, that it won't make any difference. They were still going to kill. Whatever was, or is, wrong in Reynolds' brain meant that his sole focus in life was sexual gratification from the abuse and murder of others. He saw the world very differently to other people. He saw those around him as things. He knew they were alive, but he didn't care or potentially understand that they were, in and of themselves, complex beings with hopes, dreams, desires, fears, etc. No, they were just sacks of meat who happened to share the same space as him. Watching violent pornography day in and day out for years showed him how he could use these objects to get a sense of power and also get sexual gratification. I think Reynolds saw himself as better than those around him and convinced himself that he was entitled and justified in acting in this way. The only person that mattered was him. What difference would it really make if he killed people to get what he wanted? As I said before, the act of strangulation is very visual. It's a horrific way to die, and most of us, if we saw something like that in a film, would feel uncomfortable or turn away. Not Reynolds. That was the whole point. Seeing the agony in his victim's eyes, the hope and then the life draining from their face, and knowing that he had caused that to happen. I've absolutely no doubt that the psychiatrist was right, that Reynolds would have become a serial killer. I think he only didn't kill sooner because the victim he attacked in 2008 managed to fight him off, and the girl he got into the house in February 2013 started to scream and resist. I think it's fascinating, but also horrifying, how much of Reynolds' life was solely devoted to murder and mayhem. He spent hours writing stories about it, editing pictures to fit his fantasies, and was relentless in trying to find a victim. I also believe that Reynolds, after killing Georgia, considered for a moment whether he could get her body out of the way and then return to the property in order to meet the other girls he'd invited round, so he could kill again. I think the only reason he cancelled was not because his bloodlust was satiated, but purely for practical reasons, as he knew that moving her remains would take longer than he thought. I always find images or descriptions of the movements of killers after they're killed fascinating. I sometimes imagine myself in that situation, not often to be clear. How would I feel knowing I'd done this? I think it would be a combination of blind panic and also fear knowing that at some point I was going to prison. In that situation, I couldn't act normally if he paid me. But with Reynolds, he went to the cinema and was acting totally normally, and I always find this complete disconnect really interesting. No doubt it reflects his underlying psychopathy, a complete inability to feel any remorse for his actions, but I also think that he was calm because, no matter what happened next, he'd achieved his aim. He'd lived out his fantasy and could revisit that memory over and over again. I imagine in the aftermath, Jamie Reynolds, the sadistic, sexual psychopath and necrophile that he is, was probably feeling very pleased with himself. Lucy Letby is the 33-year-old woman who worked as a registered nurse in the neonatal unit at the Countess of Chester Hospital from 2011 to 2016, which offers high dependency care for babies who are often extremely unwell, including those who are born prematurely. The children here are the most vulnerable, the most in need of love, professional care and protection, with the staff who work in this unit being tasked with one of the greatest responsibilities in the entire medical field. Letby utterly abused this trust, and in the space of just 12 months, murdered 7 babies and attempted to murder 6 others, with most of her victims being days, or in some cases hours old. This is a shocking case which has been in the newspapers since her first arrest in July 2018. It was only at her trial that the true scale of Letby's horrific crimes and her completely inhumane behaviour were laid bare, showing that she is an extremely dangerous, calculating and depraved woman who has now been proven to be a serial killer and one of the worst child killers in UK history. Welcome to Evil Among Us. Lucy Letby was born on the 4th of January 1990 in the city of Hereford, in the county of Herefordshire, in the UK. She's the only child of Susan and John Letby, and was apparently raised in what has been described as a middle-class family. Letby attended mainstream school and was described as an awkward but polite child, who her friends described as one of the, quote, geeky girls. From a very young age, Letby wanted to be a nurse, and so, after school, she enrolled in the University of Chester to study nursing, graduating with a degree in 2011. She was the first person from her family to go to university, and was described by friends as, quote, always the first home on a night out, taking her studies seriously. Letby remained in the city of Chester and joined the Countess of Chester Hospital straight after graduation, began working in the neonatal unit of the hospital, which is shown in this video, which hauntingly shows the scene of Letby's crimes. She would remain working here until her first arrest in 2018. However, it should be noted that while she was mainly based here, she did cover shifts at other hospitals. Letby had been the focus of some attention in her role. On the 6th of February 2012, she appeared in a photo holding a baby as part of a story about a resident who had donated money to the hospital's appeal. On the 28th of March 2013, Letby was the subject of a short interview about her job, in which she stated her role at the hospital involved, quote, caring for a wide range of babies, requiring various levels of support, and that she enjoyed, quote, seeing them progress and supporting their families. A picture that has become synonymous with this case was taken whilst Letby completed her placement at Liverpool Women's Hospital. In addition, on the 6th of August 2015, Letby appeared in a newspaper article about fundraising. However, by the time this article was published, Letby had killed 4 children and attempted to murder 2 others. Lucy Letby was sociable and outgoing. She seemed to have a good circle of friends. Several photos have been released of her on nights out, having a good time. She seemed outwardly entirely normal. There's no recorded abuse in her background, and Lucy Letby appeared to be completely normal to those around her. She had no disciplinary issues at work, and there were no obvious concerns about her behaviour whilst working as a nurse. This is what made what happened over the course of just 12 months between June 2015 and June 2016 so inexplicable, with Letby engaging in a campaign of murder which would shock the country. All the victims were referred to by letters in the court proceedings, and I'll follow this pattern. But, whilst they're referred to as child A, B, etc., I'm going to predominantly call them babies, because that's what they were. This reinforces the fragility of those that Letby targeted and killed. We're going to go through each crime, each murder, each attempted murder, as I think that's the only way that the true horror in this case can be laid bare. Lucy Letby's first confirmed murder victim was a baby boy known as A, who was born prematurely at 8:31 p.m. on the 7th of June 2015, and he was admitted to the neonatal intensive care unit at the Countess of Chester Hospital. The next day, he was improving and was breathing on his own in his incubator and was being fed express breast milk. Despite being premature, baby A was relatively healthy. At 7:30 p.m. on the 8th of June 2015, Lucy Letby came on shift and had a handover meeting with the day nurse who'd been assigned to look after A. Letby then went onto the ward at 8 p.m, and just 26 minutes later, she called a senior doctor to the baby's incubator and said the baby was in distress. They noticed odd discoloration on the boy's skin, who was now unconscious and in cardiac arrest. Despite attempts to revive him, baby A was pronounced dead at 8:58 p.m, just over 24 hours after his birth. It was determined that baby A had most likely been injected with air into his bloodstream minutes before his cardiac arrest. So this would mean that Letby had injected air into this child's body at around 8:20 p.m, just 20 minutes after she entered the ward. She'd never met this child before, so killed him within 20 minutes of seeing him for the first time. As this recurring theme, I want to summarise why air in the bloodstream is so dangerous. Basically, injecting air induces gas bubbles into the body, which then can block the passage of blood, leading to organs shutting down. If this occurs in the heart, it can lead to a heart attack. In the brain, it can result in stroke. It can prove fatal extremely quickly. An expert at court stated the injection of air into baby A's body was done, quote, by someone who knew it would cause significant harm. Just over 24 hours after murdering baby A, Letby targeted his twin sister, baby B, who was also in intensive care on the neonatal unit. Just before midnight on the 9th of June 2015, doctors were alerted to the fact that B's blood oxygen level was dangerously low, and the nasal prongs which were feeding her additional oxygen had been removed. These were replaced, and B was given additional oxygen, which meant she luckily stabilised. It's believed that Letby removed the prongs and also potentially injected her with oxygen. Baby C was a little boy, born prematurely at 30 weeks, weighing just 800 grams, and was in intensive care, but was doing well. The late evening of the 13th of June 2015, approximately 5 days after his birth, Lucy Letby was on shift and had been assigned to look after a poorly baby in the adjacent room. The assigned nurse for baby C stepped out briefly, and when she returned, she found Lucy Letby in the room and the child in cardiac arrest. It's believed that Lucy Letby, in those few moments that baby was left alone, had injected air into his body via his nose tube. Doctors battled to save baby C's life, but were unable to. His parents were sat in the family room, obviously going out of their mind with worry, and Letby kept going in there and had to be told by a senior nurse to leave them alone, as she wasn't even the assigned nurse for their child. Doctors couldn't save C, but kept working on him for an entire hour so that the parents could organise for their child to be baptised. Knowing the baby would not survive, he was handed to his parents to spend the last few seconds with him. He was still gasping and had a pulse, but the doctors explained this was merely a brainstem response and would soon stop. However, whilst trying to spend precious seconds with their baby boy, C's father later recalled a nurse, he believed to be Letby, come in holding a basket to take the body away, with her saying, quote, "You've said your goodbyes, do you want me to put him in here?" This poor man was shocked, and he recalled in a written statement his wife saying, quote, "He's not dead yet." The next day, Letby looked up the parents on Facebook. The timing of this search indicates it was the first thing she likely did when she woke up the next day. She's shown to have repeatedly searched for them for months afterwards, including on Christmas Day. Baby D, a little girl, was born at 4:01 p.m. on the 20th of June 2015. She wasn't premature and weighed 6 pounds 14 ounces at birth. However, there were some concerns about her breathing, so she remained in the hospital under observation. Tragically, of course, it was disclosed that D ended up on the neonatal ward due to a mistake made by the hospital. On the 21st of June 2015, when the parents went to see their newborn, Dee's mother spotted Letby hovering by her daughter. At one point, the mother said that, quote, she was sort of hovering around Dee, not doing much. She had a clipboard to take notes. It got to the point where Dee's mother asked her husband to ask Letby to leave the room so they could spend time alone with their daughter. At around 4 a.m. on the 22nd of June 2015, just 2 days after Dee's birth, her parents were woken up in the room they were sleeping in and told that their daughter's condition had deteriorated rapidly. Moments before this, Letby had injected air into the child's bloodstream. Doctors battled to save her life and were able to revive her twice. When she was revived the second time, Dee was distressed and crying before going into respiratory and cardiac arrest for a third time. She could not be revived. She died. Just hours after murdering baby D, Lucy Letby was messaging friends with one text saying, quote, "We had such a rubbish night. Our job is just far too sad sometimes," and that she was having, quote, "a tough time." In response, colleagues were reassuring her that she was not at fault and simply needed a break. Lucy Letby again looked up the parents of baby D on Facebook soon after their daughter's murder. Baby E was a little boy, one of twins who was meant to be born in a different hospital, but due to a lack of bed space, his mother was sent to the Countess of Chester Hospital, where she gave birth to twins on the 31st of July 2015. Both children were premature and needed extra support, so were sent to the neonatal unit. On the evening of the 3rd of August 2015, E's mother visited her son in the unit and walked in to find Letby standing over him, and he had blood pouring from his mouth. Letby reassured E's mother, saying that everything was okay and that a senior doctor would soon be coming in to check on her son's condition. She ushered the mother out of the room, saying, quote, "Trust me, I'm a nurse." Doctors rushed to help E, who had blood pouring out of his nose and mouth. It's not clear what Letby did exactly, but it's believed she forced some instrument, potentially a feeding tube, down E's throat, causing a massive amount of damage. She had also injected him with air. Repeated attempts were made to resuscitate child E, but it was fruitless, and he died in the early hours of the 4th of August 2015. Lucy Letby then falsified medical records to try and make it look as though she was in a different room when baby E began to deteriorate. The next day, the 5th of August 2015, Lucy Letby attempted to murder baby E's twin brother, baby F. He was being fed intravenously through a bag, and Letby switched her weapon of choice. This time, she injected insulin into the bag. Soon after this, his heart rate dropped, but doctors were able to stabilize him. Insulin is a naturally occurring hormone made by your pancreas that helps regulate the amount of sugar, also known as glucose, in your blood, helping it be sent to your organs to function, or putting it into storage for later use. Glucose is the body's fuel, and too much insulin means too much glucose is taken from the bloodstream, meaning there's not enough fuel for your organs to function. In severe cases, this can lead to organ damage or organ failure, unconsciousness, and even death. Again, soon afterwards, Lucy Letby took to Facebook to search for the family of babies E and F, including on Christmas Day. Her next victim would be baby G, a baby girl who was born very prematurely in a different hospital, weighing just 1 pound 2 ounces at birth. She was transferred to the neonatal unit at the Countess of Chester Hospital in August 2015 and was doing well. When she was 100 days old, the staff had a little party to mark the milestone, but the next day, the 7th of September 2015, Lucy Letby fed an excessive amount of milk to baby G through her nasogastric tube and also, probably, injected her with air at the same time. The reaction was almost immediate. Baby G was in horrific amounts of distress and was struggling to breathe whilst projectile vomiting. Doctors worked to save her and succeeded, as she was sent to another hospital where she soon recovered. She was then returned to the neonatal unit at the Countess of Chester on the 16th of September 2015. On the 21st of September 2015, Lucy Letby was working a day shift, and in the morning, she again fed baby G an excessive amount of milk and likely again injected air into her bloodstream. Again, she began to projectile vomit and briefly stopped breathing before being stabilised. She was then put on a monitor to measure her oxygen level and her heart rate. But around 3 p.m. that same afternoon, Letby was heard to shout for help and was found standing over baby G, who was again struggling to breathe, and Letby was apparently trying to help stabilise her. The monitor had been switched off. Doctors intervened and baby G was saved due to Letby having, quote, discovered her in time. The murder of baby I, a baby girl, is particularly heinous and shows the evil of Lucy Letby, her determination to kill the children she targeted, as well as her sadistic behaviour linked to her crimes. Before eventually taking baby I's life, Letby attempted to kill her 3 times before succeeding. Baby I was 2 months old. She was in the neonatal unit due to being born prematurely, but she was doing well. On the 30th of September 2015, baby I was found struggling to breathe, just 30 minutes after Letby had fed her. On the 13th of October 2015, another nurse on the night shift saw Letby lurking in the doorway of baby I's room. They then checked on her and found that she looked extremely pale and was obviously struggling to breathe. Again, baby I was stabilised. In the early hours of the 23rd of October, another collapse occurred, but baby I was resuscitated and recovered to the point where she was showing signs of hunger. Less than an hour later, an alarm went off and doctors rushed to baby I's incubator and found Letby stood beside it. Baby I went into respiratory and cardiac arrest and could not be revived. It appears that on each occasion, Letby had injected air into this child's bloodstream. Baby I's mother was obviously devastated by the loss of her daughter, who was doing so well, and, as part of the bereavement service offered by the unit, she was given time alone with her daughter to give her a bath and say her goodbyes. However, she said in court later that when she was alone with her daughter bathing her, Letby came into the room, quote, smiling, and kept going on about how she was present at baby I's first bath and how much baby I had loved it. This obviously distressed baby I's mother. She was trying to spend time with her daughter for the last time, and Lucy Letby was there beaming in this tragic moment. I want to refer to the line of questioning regarding this incident from Lucy Letby's trial in 2023. These are all direct quotes. So, with regard to the comment about the bath, the prosecution asked her, "Why did you say that?" Letby replied, "I was trying in this awful situation to have a little bit of normality, and I was referring to a positive memory. It was not meant with any malice. It was just trying to reflect on a happier memory." The prosecution said, "How can you sit there and say baby I was enjoying her first bath when she was dead?" Letby said, "She had her first bath when she was alive. That was what I was referring to. I was referring to the earlier bath."
Just a break here. There was no earlier bath. The prosecutor asked, "Were you getting a thrill out of what you were watching? The grief and despair you were watching in that room?" Letby said, "Absolutely not." In addition, Lucy Letby sent a letter of condolence to the family of baby I, something the nurses never usually did. Babies L and M were newly born twin boys. On the 9th of April 2016 during the day shift, Letby injected insulin into baby L, having increased the dosage she used before. She also injected air into baby M's bloodstream. I believe these children were in the same room. Both children became poorly quickly. With regards to baby L, he was described as, quote, close to death, after his heart rate and breathing dropped dramatically without warning, but he improved on the night shift that day, when Letby was not around, or went on to make a speedy recovery. Baby M was also stabilised quickly and recovered when Letby was not on shift. Baby N was a baby boy who was born at 34 weeks, weighing only 3 pounds 6 ounces, and Lucy Letby attempts to kill him 3 times. At 1 a.m. on the 3rd of June 2016, he suffered a sudden lowering of his blood oxygen levels due to Letby most likely injecting him with air. 12 days later,
On the 15th of June 2016, Letby tried to kill baby N twice in one day. The first time, in the morning, by shoving a breathing tube down his throat, which caused blood in his mouth, restricting his breathing, which made it difficult for doctors to help him. At 3 p.m, he again was having difficulty breathing, and blood was again found in his mouth, suggesting that Letby had repeated the same thing and forced a breathing tube down his throat. However, he was able to be stabilised and subsequently recovered. Lucy Letby's last confirmed murder victims were a pair of baby boys, baby O and baby P, who were two of triplets. Baby O lost his life on the 23rd of June 2016. He was healthy, but then suddenly rapidly declined. He could not be resuscitated. During his post-mortem, bruising was found to his liver, which was assumed to have been down to damage caused when doctors tried to save his life. However, it appears that Letby potentially hit this child with some force to his abdomen, as well as injecting him with air. Just a day later, Lucy Letby murdered baby P, baby O's brother, and the second child of the triplets. Preparations were being made to move baby P to another hospital, when Letby is reported to have told a doctor, quote, "He's not leaving here alive, is he?" Soon afterwards, baby P died, having air injected into his stomach, which then caused respiratory shutdown. Lucy Letby, in the space of just 12 months, had murdered 7 babies and attempted to murder 6 others. After the deaths of babies O and P in June 2016, Lucy Letby was moved to an administrative role, meaning she was still employed by the NHS but had no access to patients. This move was due to doctors in the hospital firmly believing that Letby was involved in these deaths and others. In terms of the stats, there was a 10% increase in the number of fatalities in the unit, solely due to Letby's actions. Despite significant concerns, the police were not called immediately. I believe this didn't happen for over a year. Instead, internal investigations were conducted, as well as consultation with the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health and the Royal College of Nursing, who carried out their own investigations and completed reports. Eventually, based on these investigations, Cheshire Police were eventually contacted. It was apparent that someone had caused the deaths and injuries of numerous children, and the only consistent person present during all of these incidents was Lucy Letby, as shown by this chart. On the 3rd of July 2018, Lucy Letby was arrested by the police for the first time on suspicion of 8 counts of murder and 6 counts of attempted murder, and this video shows the knock on the door at her property in Westbourne Road, Chester, and also a very short clip of her police interview, which is all that's been released at the time of recording.
Hello, Lucy, is it? Yes. Hello, my name's Cheshire Police. Okay, step in 2 seconds.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, not a problem.
Yeah. I'm going to put you in the back seat over here.
Hold on, man, to
Yes.
get the seat up.
Okay, just take a seat in there for me, Lucy. I'll move that seat forward a bit shortly.
Yeah, I've just had knee surgery.
Oh, right, okay.
They told me that there had been a lot more deaths and that I'd been linked to somebody that was there for a lot of them.
Did you have any concerns that there was a rise in the mortality rate?
Yes.
Okay, so tell me about that. What concerns did you have?
I think we'd all just noticed as a team in general, the nursing staff, that this was a rise compared to previous years. They told me that there had been a lot more deaths and that I'd been linked to somebody that was there for a lot of them.
Did you have any concerns that there was a rise in the mortality rate?
Yes.
Okay, so tell me about that. What concerns did you have?
I think we'd all just noticed as a team in general, the nursing staff, that this was a rise compared to previous years.
Lucy Letby's home was searched, and the police recovered incriminating evidence almost immediately. Most concerningly were notes that Letby had written, which appeared to be confessions to her crimes. These will be returned to later. In this Ibiza carrier bag, found by police in Lucy Letby's bedroom, were a number of hospital shift handover sheets from 2016, a month where she murdered 2 children and tried to kill 1 other. In this Morrison shopping bag, also recovered from her bedroom, police found 31 handover sheets and a blood gas reading for a child she'd attacked. Lucy Letby was released under investigation whilst police continued their inquiries. Finally, after this arrest in July 2018, 2 years after the last murders, she was suspended from her job with conditions not to enter the Countess of Chester Hospital or any other medical facility unless it was a medical emergency. She was arrested again on the 10th of June 2019 and, after further questioning, again released. Lucy Letby's final arrest came on the 10th of November 2020 and, on the 11th of November 2020, she was charged with 8 counts of murder and 10 counts of attempted murder. She was remanded into custody to await her day in court. Lucy Letby pleaded not guilty to all charges, and so her trial began at Manchester Crown Court on the 10th of October 2022 before Mr. Justice Goss, with it being expected to last 6 months, but in fact it lasted almost 9 months. The final set of charges related to the murder of 7 babies and the attempted murder of a further 10. The defence's strategy was to argue that all these incidents were as a result of, quote, massive failure of care in a busy hospital neonatal unit, far too great to blame on one person. However, the prosecution's case was extremely strong, including the fact that Letby had been on shift during each incident. She was physically seen in the area or in the room of the children immediately after they deteriorated, her behaviour around the children's families, and her searching for them on Facebook. However, one of the most damning pieces of evidence was a note that police recovered from Letby's home, which read, quote, "There are no words. I'm an awful person. I pay every day for that. No hope. I can't breathe. I can't focus. I'll never have children or marry. I'll never know what it's like to have a family. Kill myself right now. Overwhelming fear. Haven't done anything wrong. Police investigation. Forget. Slander, discrimination, victimization. Despair, panic, fear. Lost, hate. Hate myself so much. All getting too much. Everything taking over my life. I feel very alone and scared. What does the future hold? How can I get through it? How will things ever be like they were? They won't. I don't deserve to live. I did this. Why me? I killed them on purpose because I'm not good enough to care for them. And I am a horrible and evil person. I don't deserve mum and dad. The world is better off without me. I'm evil. I did this. In court, Letby claimed, when she gave evidence, that she wrote this because, quote, I felt at the time that if I'd done something wrong, I must be such an evil, awful person. I'd somehow been incompetent and had done something wrong which had affected those babies. So what I think she's saying is that she didn't actually kill them, but she believed that something she had done led to their deaths. Right, that's not how it reads. Letby was asked about the documents in her property, and she denied that they were, quote, souvenirs to remind her of her crimes. The jury began their deliberation on the 10th of July 2023, and on the 18th of August 2023, it was reported that Lucy Letby had been found guilty of the murders of 7 babies and the attempted murder of 6 others. Her sentencing hearing was scheduled for the 21st of August 2023. It should be noted that whilst the newspapers reported Lucy Letby's convictions on the 18th of August 2023, the verdicts had actually been read out over several hearings, I believe 3, in the days before this reporting. Letby was present during the first hearing, but refused to attend the rest. This cowardice extended to her sentencing. She refused to stand before Mr. Justice Goss to receive her punishment, her final act of defiance. There appeared to be plans to ensure that criminals of force would be at their sentencing, but, for the time being, there was nothing that could be done. However, in contrast to this thing's utter cowardice, many of the brave parents of the children she murdered and attempted to murder were in court, and some provided or read out victim impact statements, which are simply heartbreaking. This included a statement which read out on behalf of the father of baby G, who Letby tried to kill, which outlined how she'd been left severely disabled as a result of the attacks. She's registered blind, has cerebral palsy, and scoliosis. She's in desperate need of spinal operations, but due to her vulnerabilities, she may not survive the surgery. Her father added, quote, What if she outlives us? Who will care for her then? Her condition affects every aspect of our lives. We see other families and their children fishing, playing football, other things we can't do. She'll never have a sleepover, go to high school, have a boyfriend, get married. Baby I's mother stated, quote, "On the night Baby I died, we were speaking with the nurses in room 1, and they said at the rate she was improving, there was still a chance she could be home for Christmas. When they handed Baby I to us, we never wanted to let her go. We held her so tight. She was our gorgeous little princess, and I can't even begin to explain the pain when we lost her. A part of us died with her." The father of babies O and P, the twins let be murdered, there were 2 of triplets, described the moment his first son died, with him saying, quote, "I noticed the colour of baby O's skin was changing rapidly. It didn't appear normal to the naked eye. It was horrific to see, and it's an image I'll never forget. Deep down, I knew it wasn't going to end well." Baby O received a blessing from the priest and was quickly christened. Moments later, he was gone. I felt like I'd been stabbed in the heart. No words could describe how I was feeling. I kept wishing it had happened to me, and at that time would have gladly taken his place. These statements highlight front and centre not only the devastation that Letby caused, but the bravery of these parents to get up and keep going, when I'm sure all they want to do is curl up into a ball, fade away, and be with their children again. I hope with all my heart those who were taken are safe, loved and protected. Those who have survived, I've no doubt their loving parents would give them the best quality of life they're able to, because they, unlike Lucy Letby, would give their lives for their children. Due to the cowardice of Letby, Justice Goss made his sentencing remarks and passed his sentence, speaking to an empty dock. The sentencing here was filmed. I'll include a small part of it, but we'll leave a link to the full thing in the description.
This was a cruel, calculated and cynical campaign of child murder involving the smallest and most vulnerable of children, knowing that your actions were causing significant physical suffering and would cause untold mental suffering. You created situations so that collapses or causes of collapses would not be obvious or associated with you. You removed and retained confidential records of events relating to your crimes and checked up on bereaved parents. There was a deep malevolence bordering on sadism in your actions. During the course of this trial, you have coldly denied any responsibility for your wrongdoing and sought to attribute some fault to others. You have no remorse. There are no mitigating factors. In their totality, the offences of murder and attempted murder were of exceptionally high seriousness, and just punishment, according to law, requires a whole life order. Lucy Letby, on each of the 7 offences of murder and the 7 offences of attempted murder, I sentence you to imprisonment for life. Because the seriousness of your offences is exceptionally high, I direct that the early release provisions do not apply. The order of the court, therefore, is a whole life order on each and every offence, and you will spend the rest of your life in prison.
So Lucy Letby has been sentenced to a whole life order, meaning that she would never be released from prison. She's one of only 3 women in the UK prison system who are guaranteed to die behind bars, including Rose West and Joanna Dennehy. All 3 deserve their fates. Lucy Letby should be counting her blessings. She's been allowed to live, when she took this choice away from so many. If she had committed these crimes in the death penalty state in the US, no doubt she'd be spending the rest of her days on death row, waiting for a date with the executioner. Imagine that some people, despite her committing these crimes in the UK, where there is no death penalty, believe she should have suffered the same fate. Public inquiries about the crimes of Lucy Letby are already planned, and these will focus on whether she could have been stopped sooner. However, even at this early stage, it appears that warnings were ignored, which could have saved the lives of at least some of her victims. These stem from concerns raised by staff in October 2015 and early 2016. I'm going to play a clip from interview with Dr. John Gibbs, the consultant paediatrician on the neonatal unit, who discusses concerns about Letby that are ignored in early 2016.
It was the unusual nature of their collapses, the way they didn't respond as we'd expect to resuscitation, and for some of them, some unusual features such as strange rashes. And when this kept happening, then we became very worried something abnormal, something that couldn't be medically explained was happening.
At what point did you start to think what at that time must have been unthinkable?
Well, I think we all got extremely worried, us paediatricians. I got very worried by June 2016 because we'd had this review of some of the deaths in February 2016, which had shown that a number of them were unusual, unexpected, and had revealed that Lucy Letby was associated with all of those cases. And then in June 2016, there were several deaths in very quick succession of babies that we really, similar to some of the other babies, were doing very well. That the risk of them dying was small. We were expecting them to go home, and suddenly, one after another, they died. And that really worried us. And at that point, we felt something drastic had to be done to protect the babies on the unit.
It sounds like it was horrific being there, to be blunt.
Well, it's horrific whenever babies die in the neonatal unit. It's devastating for the parents. The fact we'd seen this many times over the previous year, far more than any of the 20-odd years that I've been working there before, was a big worry, yes.
Did it reach a point where, when an alarm went off, you were instantly worried that the same thing would be happening again?
Probably only by late 2016, by June certainly, when I went to the neonatal unit around that time for yet another collapse. I did feel, oh no, not another one.
And also I imagine you would get there and realise that Lucy Letby was in the area where this was happening as well.
Yes, and towards the end of that year, one's heart would sink when we saw Lucy Letby there again, yes.
And at that point, it sounds like your concern wasn't that she wasn't up to the job or that she wasn't a competent nurse. The concern was that she was deliberately harming babies.
Our worry was that she might be doing that because we couldn't understand why these babies, quite a few of them, were collapsing, why some of them were dying.
You and your colleagues started raising your concerns, didn't you?
Yes, they were raised at various intervals, yes, but particularly from February 2016, concerns were being raised and fed up to the senior managers.
Why did it then take so long for the police to be called in?
Well, I think there was resistance on the senior management side to involving the police, but I don't know quite why, and really the senior managers ought to be asked, because I think they were receiving advice from different sources. We paediatricians were certainly concerned that someone, and suspicions fell on Lucy Letby, could have been harming and perhaps killing patients on the unit. The managers, they have to answer for themselves. I think they were receiving advice or information, opinions from various sources. If they just listened to us hospital paediatricians, I think the police would have been called in a lot earlier.
So it appears that senior management within the hospital have a lot of questions to answer. It doesn't appear that Dr. Gibbs was the only doctor who raised concerns, and the hospital's top manager apparently demanded that doctors who raised the alert write letters of apology to Letby for the stress caused by questioning her actions. When Letby was eventually taken off the front line in June 2016 and put on clerical duties, this was apparently only after resistance from senior management. Also, she was based in an office with access to sensitive information in close proximity to senior managers who were investigating her, so clearly she could try and influence them. And if she heard something that may have been incriminating towards her, she had the opportunity to cover her tracks. I imagine that the story of the role the hospital had in allowing Letby to continue killing and attempting to kill innocent newborns will be truly shocking. There must be accountability when this is known. No hiding, no whitewashing. The public deserves the truth, and to know that something has been done to send a very clear message across the NHS, but more importantly to the patients and their families, so that they know that when they go into hospital, their safety and care is the primary concern, although that doesn't seem to have been true in this case. Lucy Letby has now been confirmed as a serial killer, and the UK's most prolific killer of babies in modern times. She is a truly horrific individual who abused her position of trust so utterly to take away the lives of innocent, sick children who had no way of defending themselves or calling for help. This is nothing to say of the horror the family suffered, knowing that someone who they put their complete trust in was so sadistic and so evil. Just saying what this woman did is horrifying enough. Lucy Letby murdered 7 babies and tried to kill 6 others. However, the details which I present in this video are even more heinous. She killed babies who were only hours old, committed attacks within hours of each other, killed siblings, repeatedly tried to kill some of the babies over and over again, gave the grieving parents no peace, and has shown no remorse of any kind about anything she's done. Lucy Letby will spend the rest of her life in prison, but the question still remains why she did it. The truth is we don't know, and will likely never fully know. Letby has no vested interest in admitting her crimes. Her denial is probably the only thing she has left, and no doubt she'll appeal the convictions, and when this is unsuccessful, her length of sentence, both of which I have no doubt will be denied. We do have a similar case to draw on, and that's the case of Beverly Allett, who, whilst working as a nurse in the Grantham and Kesteven Hospital in Lincolnshire, murdered 4 children, attempted to murder 3 more, and caused grievous bodily harm to a further 6 between February and April 1991. Why Allett committed her crimes has never been definitively identified. She's never admitted them, but it's believed that she suffered from 2 conditions: Munchausen syndrome and Munchausen syndrome by proxy. These are both rare psychological disorders where a person's main aim is to gain attention, with the former resulting from the sufferer pretending to be ill or deliberately producing symptoms of illness in themselves, and the latter being doing this to a third party. An example of Munchausen's by proxy would be a woman who deliberately makes her child ill in order to gain attention from medical professionals. The reason why Alice is believed to have suffered from both conditions is that she was known to feign injuries, with her wearing bandages and casts over fictitious injuries, and she spent significant amounts of time attending hospitals as a teenager, with reports of medical ailments which had no basis in reality. She also had a disturbing history of psychological problems. While trying to be a nurse, she smeared feces on the walls in a nursing home where she trained, and apparently also put this in the refrigerator for others to find. Her boyfriend at the time said later she was aggressive, manipulative, and deceptive, claiming false pregnancies as well as rapes before the end of the relationship. How with this profile she became a nurse is beyond me, but she did, and it's believed that when her own fictitious injuries didn't get her the attention she needed, she began to murder and harm children in her care. On one occasion, she was held for saving a child's life, with the staff not realising that she was the one who injected air into their bloodstream, which was her preferred method of attack, followed by an overdose of insulin, exactly like Lucy Letby. However, there are differences in these 2 cases. There's currently no real evidence that Lucy Letby displays traits of Munchausen syndrome. I think potentially there are some indicators of Munchausen's by proxy, as she does appear to have tried to use some of the deaths of the children to get reassurance from colleagues and attention. Like Allett, she was praised for saving the life of a child she herself had tried to murder. In addition, it's mentioned that she was infatuated with the doctor in the hospital, and on at least one occasion, she went to him to get help with the children that she'd harmed. So potentially her behaviour was also to get his attention. However, whilst I think this was part of her thinking, I believe it was a far less significant factor in this case compared to that of Beverly Allett, and that Lucy Letby's motivations and underlying issues are far more sinister and infinitely more dangerous. Specifically, I think that Lucy Letby is a psychopath, a narcissist, and a sadist. With regards to narcissism, I know that this personality disorder is complex, with different subcategories, but to simplify, the core of most narcissists is low self-esteem and often self-loathing and self-hatred. They spend their entire lives hiding behind a false identity that portrays them as charming, charismatic, confident, articulate, successful, and unique. Maintaining this facade is everything to the narcissist, and they crave what is known as narcissistic supply, other people giving them validation, admiration, reassurance, power, and control. This enables them to continue to craft a perception that, rather than the insecure person they are in fact superior and worthy of special treatment. This does make sense if you think about it. If you're trying to get as far away from feelings of yourself that you hate, you would convince yourself of the polar opposite. So it goes from I am inferior and unintelligent to I'm actually superior and a genius. As time progresses, they can start to fully believe their delusional thinking. If an incident occurs which pierces this shell and hits at the very core of the narcissist, they suffer a narcissistic injury where they experience the motions they're so desperately trying to avoid. So for example, feelings of incompetence or unworthiness. In response, they go into what is known as the narcissistic rage, a response where they seek to get revenge against whoever or whatever has caused them to feel this way, and also as a way to reinforce to others the facade they're so desperate to project. Reflecting this onto Letby, I believe that at her core is likely cripplingly low self-esteem and self-loathing, with a significant part of this being that she wasn't sure she was actually capable of being a nurse, something she'd wanted to be since she was a child. As a shield to this, over the years, she created this perception that she was in fact superior to others, worthy of special attention and recognition. The fact she'd been in the papers for various things as part of her role likely fell into this, and I imagine she considered herself an amazing nurse, the best on the unit. I firmly believe that something happened in 2015 which shattered this, a major event, at least to her anyway, or a sequence of events, which led Letby to suffer a narcissistic injury. I think this likely has something to do with the hospital. Potentially she felt she wasn't getting special treatment. Maybe she was denied a promotion. It could have been any number of things. As a response, she hit at the very heart of the establishment, harming children on the ward as a way to bring the unit into disrepute, to punish the management or other staff for how they made her feel. Also, I think the crimes enabled her to reaffirm to herself how special she was. She was getting away with murder in plain sight, and I've no doubt this made her feel very clever, watching the chaos unfold and knowing she was the cause. And, as she kept getting away with it, her feelings of superiority must have grown. This, in my opinion, would actually explain the note that she wrote, where she used the sentence, quote, "I killed them on purpose because I'm not good enough to care for them, and I am a horrible and evil person." She killed them because at her core, she didn't feel good enough. And when she was reminded of this, she responded by murdering and attempting to murder the children. Lucy Letby's clear narcissism is shown by other factors as well. Referring back to this note, despite her having killed 7 children, it's entirely self-centered. It's all about her. How will I get through this? I won't have a family. There's not a single word about anyone else but herself. Also, it's shown by her behaviour in court, specifically her lack of emotion when the details of the baby she murdered were read out in court. But when a doctor she knew, I believe the one she had feelings for, gave evidence, she began to cry. Letby couldn't care less about the children she murdered, but when someone she knew was standing up and telling the world about what she was really like, she couldn't handle it. She cried out of self-pity as her carefully crafted facade was being shattered. Her crimes themselves, and these last 2 points, I think are also clear evidence of her psychopathy. She has no remorse, no guilt, no empathy for what she has done. The only thing she cares about is how it's impacted her life. The last element I believe is sadism, which is intrinsically linked to the issue of narcissism and psychopathy. Specifically, I've no doubt that Letby felt extremely powerful, seeing the direct results of her crimes. She couldn't help but go into a room with a grieving mother, bathing her dead baby, in order to gloat and brag with a smile planted all over her face. She wanted to see what she had done. She wanted to see the pain in the mother's eyes. She likely felt a massive thrill, knowing that this mother was looking at the woman who'd killed her child, and she didn't know. Her checking on Facebook was again her looking for signs of the chaos she'd caused. She even looked at the grieving parents' details on Christmas Day. I've no doubt this sick, twisted woman, as part of her Christmas celebrations and a present to herself, was desperately hoping to see some tragic post about the parents' despair that their child or children were not there for their first Christmas. Again, I'm sure she would have been sat there, beaming, knowing she caused this. Also, she would have likely shuffled through the paperwork she'd taken from the hospital, her trophies, reliving her crimes. This all fed into her narcissism. I did these things, and no one knows. I am a genius. These are just my thoughts working on basic information. As the weeks, months and years progress, more details about Letby will likely be published, giving flesh to the bones of any psychological assessment of her. However, I think there's a strong possibility that whatever initially triggered Lucy Letby's crimes, by the end, she potentially just liked killing and was addicted to whatever this act gave her. In several of her notes found in her property, the phrase, quote, "please help me" is used. I interpret that as her stating, someone needs to stop me, as I can't stop killing. No doubt if she hadn't been caught, Lucy Letby would potentially have killed hundreds. The scary thing in this case is that even with every scrap of forensic information and a detailed profile of Letby's life, we may still never know exactly why she did what she did. As I said, she's unlikely to ever tell us, and will likely deny her crimes until her dying day. As I said, a serious case review, or several, will be completed, and I'd be surprised if there were not previous concerns about Letby, with her potentially injuring other children in various ways, whilst also in a narcissistic rage, but not going as far as killing them. I'd be extremely surprised if she simply began killing children one day, without any build-up. Letby did work shifts in other hospitals, and I think further crimes linked to her may be revealed in the future. Potentially what we currently know is just the tip of the iceberg. However, regardless of the fact that not all the puzzle pieces are present, I don't think it could be questioned that Lucy Letby is an extremely dangerous woman who caused untold misery to so many families and whose crimes are some of the most heinous that the UK has ever seen. She deserves to spend the rest of her life shut away from society. Wednesday the 30th of March 1986 was any other school day at Dunblane Primary School in Dunblane, near Stirling in Scotland, but all that changed just after 9:30 a.m. when Thomas Hamilton, a 43-year-old paedophilic loner, walked into the school with 4 handguns and began firing. In less than 5 minutes, he murdered 17 people, including 16 children, with the oldest being 6 years old, in a case of mass murder which shocked the country and which has become known as the Dunblane Massacre. Welcome to Evil Among Us. Thomas Hamilton was born on the 10th of May 1952 in Glasgow, Scotland. He had a confusing childhood, with him finding out that his older sister Agnes was in fact his mother, and that the people he thought were his parents were in fact his grandparents, and that his real father had abandoned him when he was only 18 months old. How this affected Hamilton is unclear, but I think that it's reasonable to assume that it led to a lifelong mistrust of others and perpetual anger about his lot in life. Hamilton grew up to be an unpleasant, petulant man, described as, quote, a loner and, quote, weirdo by those who knew him. He appeared to have 2 obsessions: clubs attended by young boys and guns. With regards to the former obsession, Hamilton was heavily involved in the Scout movement in Scotland from a young age, and by his early 20s was a Scout leader. However, in 1974, aged 22, he was removed from this position due to concerns about his behaviour around the boys in his charge. This initially doesn't seem to have been sexual in nature, but more his reckless disregard for their welfare. It appears that the incidents which led to him being removed from the Scouts were 2 weekend trips in 1974, where Hamilton lied and said that he had booked a hostel for him and 8 boys to stay at. However, in fact the children slept in Hamilton's van in extremely cold conditions. However, nothing was ever Hamilton's fault, and any time he was disciplined or removed from a position, he would gripe to the authorities, writing long letters to anyone who would listen about how hard done by he was. Hamilton was undeterred and set up his own, quote, boys' clubs. He would hire out halls at various schools in and around the Dunblane area for activities. Each club would see 50 to 70 boys attending. It was here that there were significant concerns about Hamilton's behaviour around these children. with him apparently telling the boys to take their shirts off under the guise of wishing to observe their physical fitness levels. Hamilton would also run summer camps, where it's claimed that he would encourage the boys to walk around naked and rub suntan lotion into his body. Hamilton would also take pictures of the boys when they were bare-chested, and apparently made no attempts to hide his behaviour, with people who peered in the window of Hamilton's property noticing these pictures hung all over his wall. Whilst Hamilton was never prosecuted for any offences, police received at least 10 complaints about his behaviour towards these young boys and his attention towards them. Hamilton seemed obsessed with being around young male children, and so, as each one of his clubs was shut down due to concerns, he would simply ask another local authority for permission to set up somewhere else. Between 1981 and 1996, Thomas Hamilton ran at least 20 of these so-called boys' clubs. This behaviour, coupled with his possessing these pictures of children, leave me in no doubt that Thomas Hamilton was a paedophile who had a sexual interest in young male children. Hamilton was extremely litigious, and every time an allegation was made about him, he would begin bombarding councils and MPs with letters stating how everyone was slandering him and how unfairly he was being treated. However, remember, this is a man who's claiming that all accusations are malicious, but you could see pictures of shirtless boys on his wall if you went to his house. It's clear that Hamilton was a man who expected everything his way. He wants to be around young boys for his own sexual gratification and would not accept anyone trying to stop him. He couldn't give a shit about the welfare of the children or the fact that parents were trying to protect their children. No, Thomas Hamilton believed he was entitled to act in any way he wanted. Clearly, he saw nothing wrong with his behaviour. Behind closed doors, Hamilton was also a monster and a bully towards his own family members. It was revealed after the massacre that he would bully and abuse his aging grandfather, regularly shouting at him and urinating in his drinks, taking great pleasure in torturing the man. It appears that everyone in Hamilton's world was just there for him to use and abuse, and nothing was standing in his way. And there was one incident which epitomised how he dealt with people who challenged him. Specifically, in the early 90s, a mother of one of the children at his clubs had gone to the police to complain about his behaviour. Hamilton stopped outside the woman's house and confronted her, saying that he'd heard that she'd called him a pervert. Hamilton then pulled a gun from under his seat, pointed it at her, and said it was loaded. The Dunblane massacre led to a crackdown on the possession of handguns in the UK. But before this incident, certain handguns were legal to privately own, and Hamilton was obsessed with collecting and displaying his collection of firearms. 4 of these weapons he would use on the day of the murders. Hamilton would apparently talk to his guns, cooing over them as if they were children. I think guns represented power to Hamilton and made him feel less like a sad little man. So, you had a recipe for disaster. You had a man who was obsessed with guns, had a perverted fascination with small children, and a persecution complex against a society that he saw was getting in the way of what he rightfully thought he was entitled to. In the years leading up to the massacre, Hamilton's complaints to everyone and anyone who would read them were becoming more frequent and unhinged, and it's clear he was becoming more angry and more unstable. Hamilton also appeared to be blaming the rumours about him, rather than his own behaviour, on his kitchen fitting business suffering. Word to the wise, if you want people to let you into their home to fit a kitchen, stop taking pictures of their children. In early 1996, Hamilton was again sending more deranged letters to various people, complaining about his apparent persecution, and it's in these communications that his specific disdain for Dunblane Primary School is revealed. In a letter written to a member of the local education authority in January 1996, Hamilton wrote, quote, "At Dunblane Primary School, where teachers have contaminated all the older boys with this poison, even former cleaners and dinner ladies have been told by teachers at the school that I am a pervert. There have been reports at many schools of our boys being rounded up by staff and even warnings given to entire schools by head teachers during assembly. One of his last letters, sent on March the 7th, 1996, just 6 days before the massacre, was sent to Queen Elizabeth, with Hamilton again moaning about how persecuted he was. The letter concludes with the following paragraphs, quote, "I've been involved with the organisation of boys' sports clubs for over 20 years, and the rumours circulated by officials of the Scout Association have now reached epidemic proportions across Central Region. As well as my personal distress and loss of public standing, this situation has also resulted in loss of my business and ability to earn a living. Indeed, I cannot even walk the streets for fear of embarrassing ridicule. All of this and more has been caused by the maladministration of the Scout Association and their denial of natural justice and duty of care. To some Scout officials, it was simply a ruse to oust a rival group. I turn to you as a last resort and am appealing for some sort of intervention in the hope that I may be able to regain my self-esteem in society. I am your obedient servant, Thomas W. Hamilton." I'm not sure what's more delusional, the fact that Hamilton couldn't see any issue with his behaviour and thought it was just a way for them to get rid of a, quote, rival, or the fact that he thought that he was that important that Queen Elizabeth would intervene. However, aside from writing letters, evidence was uncovered after the massacre which indicated that Hamilton may have been planning his crimes for 2 years before he acted. In particular, there was some evidence that Hamilton had been interrogating the children at his clubs about the layout and the timetable at Dunblane Primary School, and in particular which times and days had occurrences where the most number of children were gathered in one place. From these inquiries, Hamilton learned that on Wednesdays there was a school assembly, and then the Year 1 children, aged 5 to 6 years old, went straight to their PE class at the gym, with him finding out the location of this room. It's clear that Hamilton was planning an event which, in his twisted mind, would punish society for trying to stop him from indulging his sexual attraction to small boys. At 8:40 a.m. on the 16th of March 1996, Thomas Hamilton was seen scraping ice off his van. This was the last sighting of him prior to his rampage. Hamilton then loaded the van with 4 handguns, including 2 9mm Browning HP pistols and 2 .357 Magnum revolvers. He also brought with him 743 rounds of ammunition and ear protectors. At 9:30 a.m, Hamilton parked his van near to a telegraph pole and cut the wires, I assumed stock calls to the police. He then armed himself and walked around to the front of the school. This map showed his route. It's clear that he knew exactly where he was going, with his ultimate destination being the gym at the back of the school. In the gym, just starting their PE lesson, was teacher Gwen Mayer and her 28 Year 1 pupils, aged between 5 and 6 years old. Also in the room were PE teacher Eileen Harold and Mary Blake, a teaching assistant. When Hamilton reached the gym, he began to fire rapidly and randomly aiming at anything that moved. Eileen Harold and Mary Blake were both shot, but they survived and managed to barricade themselves in a store cupboard with several wounded children. Gwen Mayer was shot and killed instantly whilst trying to protect the children. Hamilton fired 29 shots, killing 1 child instantly and wounding several others. He then fired another 14 shots before approaching wounded children and firing 16 point-blank shots into them. An 11-year-old pupil was walking around the outside of the gym when he heard screaming and loud bangs. The child looked in and Hamilton fired at him, missing him, but the child was injured with flying glass before he ran away. Hamilton then fired 24 shots in various directions, including targeting people who were walking or running past. Hamilton then left the gym and fired another 4 rounds towards the library, hitting and injuring another member of staff. Hamilton was standing in an area surrounded by classrooms, and he fired 9 bullets into a room of 11-year-olds who were cowering on the floor with their teacher. 1 bullet hit a chair where a child had been sitting just seconds before. Hamilton then walked back into the gym, took out one of the revolvers he was carrying, put it in his mouth, and pulled the trigger, killing himself instantly. The massacre lasted between 3 to 4 minutes, during which time Hamilton had fired approximately 100 rounds of ammunition, which killed 1 adult and 15 children instantly, with a further one dying on the way to hospital. He also injured 15 others, the majority of these being children. Emergency services were on the scene quickly, and those who could be saved were rushed to hospital. The news spread quickly, and terrified parents descended on Dunblane Primary School, hoping that their children were not amongst the dead. I cannot imagine the horror that the emergency services must have witnessed on that day, and the devastation of the parents of these children, who had likely only seen them an hour before, and were having to come to terms with the fact that their angels had been murdered in a place they should have felt completely safe. I want to talk about the victims of this horrific event, but refuse to mention the name of this piece of shit in the section where I'm going to do this. I refuse to sully their memory by mentioning his name in any sentence where I mention theirs, so I'm doing this bit first. I've already outlined the broad strokes of the man I believe Thomas Hamilton was: a paedophile, narcissist, who believed he should be allowed to do whatever he wanted whenever he wanted. A deranged, self-absorbed loser whose one benefit to society was removing himself from it. Weirdly, I misspelt the word narcissist when writing this script, and the spelling suggestion was Antichrist. I wouldn't disagree with this characterization. Hamilton clearly believed that society needed to pay for how they'd apparently treated him, and he targeted children, I believe, knowing full well that there was no greater loss to a parent than losing their child, and this was his twisted way at getting back at society, by murdering children who had done nothing to him, had no idea who he was, and who had barely started their lives. There is something so evil and psychopathic in Hamilton's actions, with him knowing full well that there would be defenseless 5- and 6-year-old children in that gym, and planning their slaughter, including standing over them while they were injured and shooting them at point-blank range. Thomas Hamilton was a coward, shown not only by his actions but also by the fact he killed himself. This seems to be the eventual actions of most mass shooters, and I believe it's the ultimate fuck you to society. It's them saying, look at what I've done, and now I'm going to leave you without any answers and no peace. I go out on my terms. The truth is, these cowards are too weak to take responsibility for their actions, knowing they could not justify the unjustifiable and would rot in prison, reviled by society. I'm not overly religious, but for Hamilton, I hope there is a hell, and he will be tormented for the rest of eternity. Please feel free to give me your thoughts on the mind and motivations of Thomas Hamilton. The nation was in shock as a result of the massacre at Dunblane Primary School, and it understandably dominated the headlines for weeks. Changes were made quickly in the aftermath, including a ban on private ownership of handguns, and the gym where the children and their teachers died was torn down. I remember the day this happened and the days afterwards. Although I was only young, I knew that this was something really bad, an example of pure evil. I remember specifically that there was a prayer published in one of the newspapers with all the names of the children and their teacher that died, and I said that prayer every day for months afterwards, hoping that God would hear me. I don't remember all of it, but 26 years later, I still recall how it ended, with it saying, "Safe with Jesus, safe above, please accept our nation's love." Now, as I did back then, I want to say each of their names, and I want to show you pictures of each of them, showing you the beautiful children they were, so that they are remembered. Gwen Mayer, age 45 years old, the teacher who tried to protect her children. Abigail McLellan, age 5. Victoria Clydesdale, age 5. Sophie North, age 5. Ross Irvine, aged 5. Mari McBeath, aged 5. Marissa Curry, aged 5. Megan Turner, aged 5. Kevin Hassel, aged 5. John Petrie, aged 5. Joanna Ross, aged 5. Hannah Scott, aged 5. Emma Crozier, aged 5. Emily Morton, aged 5. David Kerr, aged 5. Charlotte Dunn, aged 5. Brett McKinnon, aged 6 years old. On Monday, the 24th of May 2010, Peter Gee, a caretaker at the Holmfield Court block of flats in Bradford in the UK, sat down to check the CCTV footage from over the weekend. What he saw would shock the nation, and was something he's unlikely to ever forget. Checking the footage for the early hours of Saturday, the 22nd of May 2010, he saw a man and a woman entering a flat. Minutes later, the woman was caught running for her life, being pursued by the man, who was armed with a crossbow. He then caught up with her, overpowered her, and dragged her back towards the front door of the flat. He then fired a crossbow bolt into her head, killing her, all in full view of the camera. The man then dragged the woman's body back into the flat. He then re-emerged, and this is what the camera caught. The man was Stephen Griffiths, a British serial killer who just killed his last victim. He ended the lives of at least 3 women between 2009 and 2010, and, when in court, proudly called himself the Crossbow Cannibal. Welcome to Evil Among Us. Stephen Sean Griffiths was born on December the 24th, 1969, in the market town of Dewsbury in West Yorkshire in the UK. He was the first of 3 children, to his mother Moira and his father, also called Stephen. The marriage broke down when Griffiths was 13, and the children and Moira moved into a council flat in the town of Wakefield. Griffiths' childhood was anything but normal, and it's clear he was exposed to extremely problematic behaviour, which shaped his future crimes. Specifically, his mother Moira would leave the children alone most nights, going out whilst dressed provocatively, and she would return with different men each time. As one neighbour stated, quote, she would go out in the garden stark naked and have sex with different men in full view of the neighbours. People would complain about it, but she didn't care. Her children, including Griffiths, would also witness this behaviour. Rumours circulated that Moira was a prostitute, and the ridicule from his classmates was something else that Griffiths had to deal with. In addition, Moira was also a criminal, and in 2007, she was convicted of falsely claiming £8,500 in benefits. In contrast, it appears that his father Stephen tried to help his son and saved every penny he could to send him to private school, specifically Queen Elizabeth Grammar School in Wakefield, where tuition is about £10,000 a year. As an aside, this is the same school where the acid bath murderer, John Haig, was educated before he went on to kill at least 6 people in the 1940s, before dissolving their bodies in acid. Anyway, despite the prestigious education, it appears the damage had already been done, with Griffiths being described as a loner and strange by those who knew him. Griffiths appeared extremely socially awkward, had few friends, and made no real attempt to become part of his school community, or any community for that matter. Instead, it appears that Griffiths, by the point he was a teenager, had devolved into his own little world, which revolved around a fascination with serial killers, violent films, weapons, martial arts, and harming animals. Upon his eventual arrest, Griffiths was found in possession of hundreds of books related to serial killers, such as the Moors murderers, but he appeared to hold particular interest and reverence for the Yorkshire Ripper, Peter Sutcliffe, who murdered at least 13 women, mainly sex workers, between 1975 and 1980. Whilst at school, Griffiths was known to carry a knife in a briefcase and would frequently speak to his classmates about skinning birds and torturing animals. Griffiths spent 3 years at the school, leaving at age 16. I'll break here for a moment to highlight the red flags in this case, which were clear at a young age. So you have a man who clearly grew up in a neglectful household, likely not being exposed to appropriate social skills that he could mirror, who invariably had resentment, likely hatred towards his mother because of her abandonment of him and putting her own needs first, and exposing him to inappropriate sexual activity, and potentially being a prostitute, or at least acting in this manner, which led to him being ridiculed. This, I believe, led to a general hatred of women, and particularly sex workers. In addition, his mother appeared happy to break the law, and likely instilled these same values into her children. In response, Griffiths began to live in his own little world, revolving around violence, serial killers, and weapons, all of which I believe represented power and recognition to him, with him perceiving that, in order to get the attention he craved as a child, acts of serious violence, including multiple acts of homicide, were the way to achieve it, to be noticed. It didn't take Griffiths long to start falling foul of the law, with his first conviction coming when he was 17 years old, when he attacked a supermarket manager with a knife, when he tried to stop him shoplifting, something Griffiths would do regularly. For this incident, Griffiths was sent to prison for 3 years, and, during this time, he told various professionals, including a probation officer and psychiatrist, that he had fantasized about becoming a serial killer and believed he would begin killing people before the age of 30 years old. In 1989, at age 19, Griffiths was again back before the court for possession of an offensive weapon, specifically a BB gun, which he would apparently use to shoot birds, which he would then take home and dissect. Just 2 years later, in 1991, Griffiths was sentenced to 2 years in prison for holding a knife to a woman's throat. However, I haven't been able to find any information about who this woman was and the particular circumstances. Whilst in prison for this offence, Griffiths' mental health was assessed, and one doctor described him as, quote, a sadistic, schizoid psychopath. The term schizoid refers to a personality disorder which is characterized by an individual wishing to pursue solitary habits, having difficulty expressing emotions and reacting appropriately to situations, and being outwardly humorous, emotionally detached and cold to others, so someone who has little vested interest in society. This, coupled with the sadistic and psychopathic labels, indicates that Stephen Griffiths was an individual who had little connection to society, no empathy, remorse or compassion for others, and derived pleasure from inflicting pain and humiliation onto others. And on top of this, his obsession with violence, serial killers, and weapons, it's clear that this is the profile of a very dangerous man. The authorities agreed, but there was little that could be done. At that point, Griffiths had not done anything which meant they could take any real action against him. However, they knew he was a ticking time bomb. In around 1997, Griffiths moved into flat 33 at Holmfield Court, a block of flats in Bradford, which is where he will remain until his arrest, and where the CCTV footage I showed at the beginning of this video was captured. Griffiths essentially turned this property into his shrine to murder and violence, adorning the walls with weapons, including samurai swords and crossbows, and amassing hundreds of books about serial killers, as well as violent movies. In 1998, aged 29, Griffiths began dating a woman called Zita Pinder, who he dated for 2 years. She later described him as controlling, not letting her go out with her friends, and generally wanted to know where she was at all times. During the relationship, Griffiths told Zita that he lived with his parents, but she eventually found out that he had a flat and insisted that she went round. When she stepped in, she was disturbed by what she found. She later described coming face to face with his weapons collection and noticing a crossbow simply leaning against the television, as well as hundreds of books on serial killers. Zita stopped seeing Griffiths soon after this incident. Investigators have speculated that this rejection was what finally led to Griffiths turning his back on the world entirely as it's clear that he was unable to live a normal life and maintain normal relationships. He therefore appeared to completely disappear into his own world, obsessed with violence and destruction. Added to this, I think this incident would have intensified Griffith's underlying hatred of women and galvanised his behaviour years later. Griffiths expressed his contempt for society online and hinted at the monster he was, with him using the pseudonym Vampire and stating, quote, "Humanity is not merely a biological condition, it's also a state of mind. On that basis, I'm a pseudo-human at best, a demon at worst." Griffiths was known to be eccentric by his neighbours. He would often be seen walking as lizards he owned on leads, but he was also known to be rude and aggressive, and he caused significant issues for the other residents. In particular, it seemed he would try to befriend women, but when he made sexual advances towards them and these were rejected, he'd become aggressive and threatened to kill or harm them. Police were made aware of these concerns, as well as the fact that Griffiths was seen repeatedly reading books on human dissection. Between 2007 and 2009, the year the murders began, police were receiving ever-increasing levels of complaints about Griffiths' behaviour and demeanour, and on at least one occasion, they seized some weapons from his property. However, they believed there was little they could do, so the only thing that occurred was that new CCTV cameras were installed, with the hope of gathering evidence to evict Griffiths or potentially had him issued with an antisocial behaviour order. These cameras, however, would eventually capture the murder of a young woman and lay bare the depravity of Stephen Griffiths. It should be pointed out that Stephen Griffiths was an intelligent, educated and cunning man. In around 2003, he obtained a bachelor's degree in psychology and, in 2004, enrolled on a part-time PhD course at the University of Bradford, which he was studying when he was eventually arrested. His thesis was going to be on 19th century murders in the Bradford area, so essentially Griffiths was spending his entire time obsessing over killers and was taking qualifications to be called doctor and become an expert in this field. Anyway, his intelligence is also demonstrated by the planning that Griffiths took before he committed his murders. Firstly, teaching himself human dissection from reading books, but also getting to know his prey, with him starting friendships with sex workers in the local area and often inviting them back to his flat for a drink, meaning that, at the time of the murders, he was known within these circles as a friendly, unassuming man. This was clearly the superficial charm associated with Griffith's psychopathy, which hid his true, horrific intent, which became apparent in June 2009 when he put his plan to become a famous serial killer into action. Stephen Griffiths' first confirmed victim was Susan Rushworth, who was aged 43 and worked as a prostitute in Bradford to fund her addiction to drugs. However, this was not all she was. This is not what any of his victims were, not even close. With regards to Susan, she was a mother of 3 children, a grandmother, and she had other family who dearly loved her. She was last seen alive getting off a bus on the 22nd of June 2009 in Bradford Town Centre. What happened to her is only known through Griffith's confession, with him stating that he met her and invited her to his flat later that day, and, when she was in the property, he beat her to death with a hammer and then dismembered her body in the bathtub. He claimed to have eaten parts of Susan's body after cooking them. He then disposed of her body parts, but has never revealed where. Confirmation of Griffith's story came when DNA analysis in his flat found significant blood splatter in the property, which was identified as belonging to Susan. At 10 p.m. on the 26th of April 2010, Griffith's second confirmed victim, 31-year-old Shelley Armitage, was last seen alive working in Rebecca Street in Bradford's red light district, close to the city centre. It's assumed that soon after this, Griffiths approached her and invited her back to his flat. When she stepped in, she was attacked, and it's believed that she was killed when Griffiths fired a crossbow bolt into her body, but also potentially stabbed her. Police later recovered horrific video camera footage of Shelley's naked and apparently lifeless body, which had been filled by Griffiths. She had the words, quote, "My sex slave," daubed in black spray paint on her back. Griffiths was heard in the video chanting, quote, "I am Vampire. I'm the bloodbath artist. Here is a model who's assisting me." Griffiths later claimed he cooked and eaten parts of Shelley's body. Griffiths then took Shelley's body to the bathroom and dismembered her, dumping her remains at the River Aire, approximately 40 miles away from the site of the murder. At the end of May 2010, human remains were found in the river and subsequently identified as belonging to Shelley. This included part of her spine, which confirmed that she must be deceased. Her father had to identify his daughter from a screenshot that the police had taken from the video shot by Griffiths, but they were only able to show her face to him due to what he'd done to her body. Heartbreakingly, the family wasn't even able to say a proper goodbye to their daughter, sister, and friend, as almost none of her remains were recovered, and what was found was buried in a child's coffin. The last confirmed victim of Stephen Griffiths was 36-year-old Suzanne Blamires, who went missing on the 21st of May 2010. Suzanne was described as bright and articulate by those who knew her, and she started to train as a nurse when she left school. Unfortunately, she developed issues with alcohol and drugs and turned to prostitution in order to fund her addictions. Suzanne did not have an easy life. In 2011, 2 men were jailed for viciously assaulting Suzanne in December 2009, just 5 months before her death. These men attacked her while she was working in the red light district and repeatedly kicked her in the head and body. Her death is the one that was captured in its entirety on CCTV. And obviously, the full footage has not been released, but screenshots of her last moments are available. These show that at 2:30 a.m. on Saturday the 22nd of May 2010, Griffiths and Suzanne are caught on CCTV arriving at his flat and then entering the lift and walking towards his property. These images are haunting as they show the last seconds of Suzanne's life. Within 3 minutes, Suzanne is captured running away from the flat, with Griffiths stood behind her, having armed himself with a crossbow. This horrific image shows the murderous intent in Griffiths' face as he chases Suzanne and then fired a crossbow bolt into her head, killing her before dragging her body into his flat. It seems that Griffiths may not have noticed the relatively new CCTV cameras which had captured his every move, and when he saw them, rather than shy away, he used this as an opportunity to show his complete contempt for human life, sticking his finger up whilst holding the murder weapon. Griffiths set about dismembering Suzanne's body and again dumped her remains like rubbish in the River Aire, but again only small pieces of her body were ever recovered. Griffiths must have known that the CCTV footage would lead to his arrest, and on Monday the 24th of May 2010, after Peter Gee had seen the video, armed police descended on the flat and Griffiths was waiting for them. As he was arrested, he proudly told officers, "I've killed a lot more than Suzanne Blamires. I've killed loads." Clearly, in Griffiths' sick mind, the main event was about to begin. He now had a captive audience and was going to get the attention he'd always craved. Stephen Griffiths admitted his crimes immediately, and the following clip shows a portion of his interview where the police are trying to establish where he dumped the remains of one of his victims, although it's not clear which one.
And what sort of location have you put them in? If you can't tell us where, what sort of location have you put them?
I don't know. Where a robot, where a computer would put it. You know, a rational, emotionless aberration would put it.
Why did you feel the need to kill her?
I don't know. I don't know if I just sometimes you kill someone to kill yourself or kill parents. I don't know. It's like deep issues inside me.
So why did you feel the need to kill any of the girls? Barton?
I don't know. Well, I'm misanthropic. I don't have much time for the human race.
There's so much to unpack here. Part of Stephen Griffiths' tone of voice is down to his Yorkshire accent, but it's also clear that he's indifferent to the suffering he's caused. He's almost bored by the interview. I imagine this is because he's having questions fired at him and he's not in control, which is not the sort of attention he wanted. Stephen Griffiths was subsequently charged with 3 counts of murder and remanded into custody to await his day in court. On the 28th of May 2010, Stephen Griffiths made his first appearance at Bradford Magistrates Court, a formality in the UK for a case such as this, before it's committed to the Crown Court. During these types of hearings, the accused simply confirms their name and their address. When asked his name, Griffiths said, quote, "The Crossbow Cannibal." This invariably caused shock in the court and sickeningly deep distress in the victims' families, who were in the court to see the man who killed their loved ones. On the 21st of December 2010, Stephen Griffiths appeared before Mr. Justice Openshaw at Leeds Crown Court and entered guilty pleas to the murders of Susan Rushworth, Shelley Armitage and Suzanne Blamires. Justice Openshaw stated that Griffiths had committed, quote, "wicked and monstrous crimes," and stated, quote, "the circumstances of these murders are so wicked and monstrous, they leave me in no doubt the defendant should be kept in prison for the rest of his life." He then sentenced him. Stephen Griffiths was sentenced to a whole life order, meaning that he will never be released from prison. I'm tempted to refer to Stephen Griffiths as a pathetic, attention-seeking loser, and, whilst this is not very professional or a clinical description, I believe it's accurate. I've already given some of my thoughts about him, in that I think that his troubled childhood led him developing a hatred of women, specifically prostitutes, and, whilst he appeared to have contempt for society as a whole, these individuals represented, in his mind, an even lower form of life. Killing them served 2 purposes. First, it eradicated these type of people from society, but also gave them the attention he desperately craved, with him inevitably fantasizing about receiving the same notoriety as the serial killers he idolized. However, I don't believe that Griffiths was a cannibal. I've not seen any evidence, i.e. forensics of kitchen utensils, etc., which should indicate that this was true. Instead, I think it's interesting that Chaig, the acid murderer who went to the same school as Griffiths, made similar claims after his arrest, with him stating that he'd drunk the blood of his victims. He later admitted this was a lie. I think that he was trying to set up a defence of insanity to avoid the hangman. That one didn't work, but also to shock others and revel in his crimes. I think the same is true of Griffiths. Calling himself a cannibal was his way of shocking people, gaining notoriety and making himself feel big and powerful, whilst also compounding the horror that his victims' poor families had to endure. However, recognition and attention only last so long, and it's reported that Stephen Griffiths has attempted suicide on repeated occasions since his imprisonment, including going on a 120-day hunger strike in 2011. It appears that Griffiths would act in this manner when other high-profile prisoners were getting attention in the press, so he clearly was desperate to refocus attention to himself. Griffiths was also attacked in prison in 2019, during which a prisoner stabbed him in the chest with a wooden spear they'd made. If that's not poetic justice, I'm not sure what is. Stephen Griffiths is currently 53 years old and will spend the rest of his miserable life in prison, which is exactly what he deserves, hopefully slipping into obscurity and eventually nothingness. The women he killed are, unfortunately, defined by their profession in the press, which really irks me. It took me a lot of research to find information about them outside of this, but they were mothers, daughters, sisters, grandmothers and friends to people who loved them and who mourned their passing. They inevitably had aspirations to their life, but fell on hard times and were forced to make decisions which I imagine they hated, but saw that they had no choice. They were human beings who did not deserve to have their lives ended in such a horrific manner. Their names again were Susan Rushworth, Shelley Armitage, and Suzanne Blamires. These women deserve to be remembered. Their lives mattered, and I hope they rest in peace.